The bone was smaller than a walnut. It sat in a cardboard box in Ohio, surrounded by rock fragments that had traveled halfway around the world. The geologist who collected these rocks had been dead for years. His widow had given them away, hoping someone might finish what her husband had started. Hans Tuvison was that someone, and when his technician accidentally cracked open one of the skulls they had been cleaning, Tuvison saw something that made him stop breathing. A tiny bowl-shaped bone, thick-walled, dense, sitting exactly where it should not have been, inside the ear of a creature that looked like a miniature deer. This bone has a name, the involucrum, and in the entire history of life on Earth, only one group of animals has ever possessed it. Whales. Not dolphins, not seals, not manatees or sea lions or any of the other mammals that have returned to the water. Only the cetaceans, the whales, dolphins, and porpoises carry this particular structure in their skulls. It helps them hear underwater, channeling sound through bone rather than air. Every whale that has ever lived, from the smallest porpoise to the largest blue whale, has an involucrum. And now, Tuvison was staring at one inside the skull of a four-legged animal that had hooves on its toes. The year was 2007. The fossils had been sitting in boxes since 1971, collected by an Indian geologist named A. Ranga Rao from mudstone deposits in Kashmir. Rao had found teeth and jaw fragments, enough to know he had something interesting. He had labeled the rocks carefully, packed them away, and planned to study them properly when time allowed. But time did not allow. Rao died with the work unfinished. Decades passed. The boxes sat in storage, their secrets locked in stone. When Tuvison finally received the collection, he had already spent 15 years piecing together the early chapters of whale evolution. He had discovered Basilosaurus, the walking whale that hunted like a crocodile in ancient estuaries. He had studied Maiacetus, the wolf-sized carnivore that waded in shallow rivers. He knew what whale ancestors looked like, and the creature emerging from these Kashmir rocks looked nothing like them. It looked like a deer, a very small deer about the size of a raccoon, with a long snout and a long tail and slender legs that ended in tiny hooves. The kind of animal you might expect to see darting through undergrowth, nibbling on leaves, freezing at the sound of a predator. Not a whale, not even close. The involucrum changed everything. Tuvison named the creature Indochus, India's pig, though it was neither a pig nor exclusively Indian. The name was a placeholder, a label for something that defied easy categories. Here was an animal that walked on land, ate plants, and looked like prey rather than predator. Yet hidden in its skull was the one anatomical feature that connected it irrevocably to the largest animals the ocean has ever produced. The discovery raised a question that had haunted evolutionary biologists for over a century. Why would a deer become a whale? The answer, Tuvison suspected, was hiding in the bones themselves. When his team examined the Indochus skeleton more closely, they found something else unusual. The leg bones were dense, much denser than you would expect in a small, agile herbivore. Dense bones are heavy. They slow you down on land. For a creature trying to escape predators in a forest, thick leg bones would be a liability. Unless you were not trying to run. Dense bones have a different function in water. They act as ballast. They help you sink, help you stay submerged without fighting against your own buoyancy. Modern hippopotamuses have dense bones for exactly this reason. They walk along riverbeds rather than swimming, their heavy skeletons holding them down against the current. Indochus, it seemed, had been doing the same thing 48 million years ago. The isotopes in its teeth confirmed the hypothesis. Oxygen atoms come in different weights, oxygen-16 and oxygen-18, and the ratio between them varies depending on whether an animal drinks fresh water or salt water, whether it eats land plants or aquatic vegetation. The teeth of Indochus showed ratios consistent with an animal that spent significant time in water. Not an ocean swimmer, not a fish eater, something in between. A creature that waded, that hid, that held its breath and waited for danger to pass. There is an animal alive today that behaves exactly like this. The African water chevrotain is a small deer-like mammal that lives in the forests of Central Africa. It weighs about 10 kilograms. It has hooves and a long snout and large eyes suited for low light. When threatened by a predator, an eagle diving from above, a leopard stalking through the underbrush, the chevrotain does something unexpected. It runs to water. It dives beneath the surface. It holds its breath for 4 or 5 minutes, walking along the bottom, invisible to the hunter above. When the danger passes, it surfaces, shakes itself off, and returns to browsing. The chevrotain is not related to whales. It is not on the path to becoming aquatic. It is simply an animal that has discovered a survival strategy. When the land is dangerous, the water is safe. 48 million years ago, in the warm coastal forests surrounding the Tethys Sea, Indochus had discovered the same strategy. It was not trying to become a whale. It was trying not to be eaten. The water was a refuge, nothing more. Evolution does not plan. It does not see the future. It only solves the problem in front of it. The problem for Indochus was predators. The solution was water. And that solution, repeated across thousands of generations, would eventually produce consequences that Indochus could never have imagined. Thuvison published his findings in the journal Nature in December 2007. The paper landed like a small earthquake in the paleontological community. For decades, scientists had assumed that whale ancestors entered the water to hunt. The earliest known whales, Maiacetus, Basilosaurus, Rodhocetus, were all carnivores, sharp-toothed predators that pursued fish into rivers and estuaries. The story seemed clear. A predator followed its prey into the water, and evolution did the rest. Indochus rewrote that story. Here was an herbivore, a plant eater with no interest in fish, an animal that entered the water not to hunt, but to hide. The shift to carnivory, to active predation, must have come later, after the ancestors of whales were already committed to an aquatic lifestyle. This was not a small revision. This was a fundamental change in how scientists understood one of evolution's most dramatic transformations. The path to the whale did not begin with hunger. It began with fear. A small, terrified creature diving into a river to escape something with teeth, surfacing when the coast was clear, doing it again the next day and the next and the next. Generations passing, bones growing denser, time in the water growing longer, the refuge becoming a home. And somewhere along the way, the home became an ocean. The story of whale evolution is often told as a triumph of adaptation. Land mammals conquered the sea. 4 legs became flippers. Nostrils migrated to the top of the skull. The largest brains on the planet learned to navigate by sound alone. All of this is true, and all of it obscures a simpler truth. Evolution begins with survival, not ambition, not destiny, just the desperate need to live long enough to reproduce. Indochus was not the direct ancestor of whales. It lived at the same time as the earliest known cetaceans, a cousin rather than a grandparent. The actual ancestor, the specific population that gave rise to Maiacetus and Basilosaurus, and eventually to blue whales and orcas, remains unknown. Perhaps it is still buried in Kashmir, waiting in the mudstone. Perhaps it eroded away millions of years ago, its secrets lost to time. What Indochus gives us is something almost as valuable as a direct ancestor. It gives us a model, a glimpse of what that unknown ancestor might have looked like, how it might have lived, why it might have taken those first tentative steps into the water. A tiny deer hiding from predators, a walnut-sized bone, preserved for 48 million years. A widow's gift of old rocks to a scientist who knew what to look for. The involucrum connected them all, the deer and the whale, the past and the present, the land and the sea. The whale's journey had begun, not with a leap into the ocean but with a frightened creature holding its breath in a shallow stream. The transformation would take 15 million years. It would be one of the most complete metamorphoses in the history of life. And it started here, in the ear, in a bone no bigger than a walnut, in the skull of an animal that had no idea what it was becoming. To understand how a single bone could steer an entire lineage, we have to zoom out. That change didn't happen in a vacuum inside one skull. It happened along the edges of a particular world, where coastlines shifted, rivers spilled into warm seas, and land animals kept finding reasons to step into the water. So before we follow this creature any further, we need to see the stage it was evolving on. 50 million years ago, the map of the world would be unrecognizable to you. The continents are scattered wrong. India is an island racing northward across open ocean toward a collision with Asia that will raise the Himalayas. Africa and South America have only recently separated, the Atlantic Ocean between them still narrow enough that a strong swimmer might almost cross it. Australia drifts in isolation, a raft of marsupials heading nowhere in particular. And where the Mediterranean Sea will one day sit, where the deserts of the Middle East will bake under relentless sun, there is water. Warm, shallow, impossibly fertile water stretching from Spain to Indonesia. This is the Tethys Sea, the cradle of whale evolution, the place where four-legged mammals learn to swim. Picture it. You are standing on the northern shore of the Tethys in what will become Pakistan. The air is thick and humid, heavy with the smell of vegetation and decay. Mangroves crowd the coastline, their roots tangled in brackish water. Rivers wind down from distant highlands, carrying sediment into a maze of deltas and estuaries. The temperature rarely drops below 30 degrees Celsius. Rain falls in sheets, sudden and violent, then stops as quickly as it started. This is not the ocean you know. There are no vast blue expanses, no abyssal trenches, no crushing depths where sunlight never reaches. The Tethys is a continental sea, pinched between land masses, rarely deeper than a few hundred meters. Its waters are bathtub warm. Its shallows teem with life. Coral reefs sprawl across the seafloor, though the corals are not quite the same species you would find today. Fish dart between the branches, some familiar, some strange, some belonging to lineages that will leave no descendants. Sharks patrol the deeper channels, their silhouettes ancient even then, their body plan already perfected by 300 million years of refinement. And at the edges, where salt water meets fresh, where rivers empty into the sea, something new is stirring. The mammals have arrived. The Eocene epoch was a time of experimentation. The dinosaurs had been gone for 15 million years, their absence leaving ecological vacancies that mammals were only beginning to fill. On land, the ancestors of horses were the size of house cats. The ancestors of elephants looked like oversized guinea pigs. Primates swung through tropical forests that stretched from pole to pole. The planet so warm that palm trees grew in Alaska and crocodiles basked on the shores of Greenland. The oceans too were in flux. The great marine reptiles of the Mesozoic, the ichthyosaurs, the plesiosaurs, the mosasaurs, had vanished with the dinosaurs. The niches they left behind were empty. The role of large marine predator was available for the first time in 100 million years. Nature, as always, filled the vacuum. From multiple directions, mammals began testing the water. Some would become seals and sea lions. Others would become manatees and dugongs. Still others would become something unprecedented: animals so thoroughly transformed by the ocean that their land-dwelling origins would one day seem impossible. The whales chose the Tethys as their proving ground. Why here? Why this particular sea, at this particular time? The answer lies in geography. The Tethys was a highway. Its currents connected the Atlantic to the Pacific, circulating warm water around the equator in a pattern that no longer exists. Its coastlines were labyrinthine, riddled with bays and inlets and river mouths that created endless gradients between fresh and salt, shallow and deep, vegetated and open. For an animal learning to swim, this was paradise. You could wade into brackish estuaries and hunt fish without ever losing sight of land. You could follow the coastline for thousands of kilometers, always finding food, always finding shelter. You could take your time. Evolution had given you millions of years to figure this out. The first whales did not conquer the ocean in a single leap. They crept into it, generation by generation, one river mouth at a time. The fossils tell the story. In the Kuldana Formation of Pakistan, in rocks dating to roughly 50 million years ago, paleontologists have found the remains of Maiacetus. This is the oldest whale we can identify with confidence, though whale seems almost like the wrong word. Maiacetus was the size of a wolf. It had 4 legs, each ending in small hooves. Its skull was long and narrow, filled with teeth designed for catching fish. Its eyes sat high on its head, positioned like a crocodile's, allowing it to watch the shore while keeping most of its body submerged. You would not recognize it as a whale. You might not even recognize it as aquatic. If you saw Maiacetus trotting along a riverbank, you might mistake it for an unusually lanky dog, or perhaps some kind of primitive ungulate that had wandered too close to the water. The ears would give it away. Even at this early stage, Maiacetus had begun developing the specialized hearing that would eventually allow its descendants to navigate by sound alone. The bones of its inner ear were thickened, denser than in other mammals of similar size. The involucrum was present, though not yet as pronounced as it would become. Maiacetus could hear underwater, not well, not with the precision of a modern dolphin, but better than any land mammal had a right to. Sound travels differently through water than through air, faster and farther, and Maiacetus was already adapting to this alien medium. Its bones tell another story. Like Indochus, Maiacetus had dense limb bones, heavier than expected for an animal of its size. The extra weight would have been a burden on land. In water, it was an advantage, natural ballast that helped the animal stay submerged while hunting along the bottom. Chemical analysis of Maiacetus' teeth suggests it lived primarily in fresh water. The oxygen isotopes in its enamel match rivers and lakes, not open ocean. This was not a sea creature. This was a river hunter, a specialist in the murky, tangled waterways where the Tethys met the land. The name Maiacetus means whale from Pakistan. It seems almost presumptuous, naming a wolf-sized river hunter after the largest animals on Earth. Yet the connection is real. The bones prove it. The ears prove it. Every blue whale that has ever sung across an ocean basin, every orca that has ever hunted in coordinated packs, every dolphin that has ever surfed a bow wave, all of them trace their ancestry back to this creature wading through Pakistani rivers in the early morning light, listening for fish. The Tethys Sea no longer exists. As India collided with Asia, the ocean between them was squeezed shut. The Himalayas rose, the seafloor buckled and lifted. What had been warm, shallow water became the highest mountains on Earth. The Mediterranean is a remnant, a puddle left behind after the main body drained away. The Caspian Sea and the Black Sea are other remnants, landlocked now, cut off from the circulation that once connected them to the world ocean. The fossils remain. Buried in the rocks of Pakistan and India, in the deserts of Egypt and the badlands of North America, the bones of early whales wait to be discovered. Each new skeleton adds detail to the story. Each new species fills a gap in the evolutionary sequence. We know now that the transition from land to sea took roughly 15 million years. We know it happened in stages, each generation slightly more aquatic than the last. We know the process was driven by opportunity, empty niches, abundant food, freedom from land-based predators, and by the slow accumulation of adaptations that made water feel less like a refuge and more like a home. The tethys provided the laboratory, the whales provided the experiment, and the results would eventually fill every ocean on the planet. Stand on a beach today, anywhere in the world. The water that touches your feet has a history. It has circulated through every ocean basin, risen as vapor, fallen as rain, frozen in glaciers, and melted again. Some fraction of the molecules in that water once flowed through the Tethys Sea. Some fraction touched the fur of Maiacetus as it slipped beneath the surface, hunting in the shallows, learning to breathe in a new rhythm. The connection is thin, almost metaphorical. 50 million years is a long time. The water has been recycled beyond recognition, the atoms scattered and recombined 1 trillion times over. Yet something persists. The whales are still here. They still breathe air, still nurse their young, still carry vestigial bones where their legs used to be. Every breath a whale takes is a reminder that its ancestors walked on land. Every dive is a return to the element that transformed them. The tethys is gone. Its children fill the world. They learned to swim in warm, shallow water. They learned to hunt in river mouths and estuaries. They learned to hold their breath a little longer, dive a little deeper, stay submerged until the air in their lungs burned and their muscles screamed for oxygen. And then, one generation at a time, they learned to let go of the land entirely. The transformation was just beginning. But evolution doesn't announce itself with a trumpet. Most of the time, it leaves you a clue the size of a broken plate, half buried, silent, and inconvenient. If you want the first chapter of a whale's story in the fossil record, you don't start with a fluke or a blowhole. You start with something that looks wrong in your hands, something that refuses to behave like a normal land mammal. That moment came in a desert that used to be coastline, where ancient rivers once emptied into the Tethys, and the boundary between land and water was a messy, tempting place to live. The skull was wrong. Philip Gingerich knew it the moment he lifted it from the rock. He had been excavating in the Kuldana Formation of northern Pakistan since 1975, searching for early primates, following the trail of Eocene mammals through layers of red and yellow mudstone. He had found teeth, jawbones, fragments of creatures that fit neatly into known categories. This skull fit nothing. It was long and narrow, almost canine in shape, with a dental battery designed for slicing flesh. The eye sockets sat unusually high, angled upward rather than forward. The brain case was small, the snout elongated, the whole architecture suggesting something between a wolf and a crocodile. Gingerich sent photographs to colleagues around the world. The responses came back puzzled. Some thought it might be a mesonychid, one of the wolf-like carnivores that had dominated the early Cenozoic. Others suggested a primitive carnivoran, perhaps an ancestor of modern dogs or bears. A few admitted they had no idea what they were looking at. The answer came from the ear. Deep inside the skull, preserved with extraordinary fidelity, were the bones of the inner ear. And those bones told a story that the rest of the skeleton seemed to contradict. The tympanic bulla, the bony housing that protects the middle ear, was constructed in a way that Gingerich had seen only once before, in whales. Not in seals, not in otters, not in any of the other mammals that had adapted to aquatic life. The specific architecture of this ear, the thickening of certain bones, the positioning of the auditory structures, all of it matched the cetacean pattern and nothing else. In 1981, Gingerich and his colleague Donald Russell published their findings in the journal Science. They named the creature Pachycetus inachus, the whale from Pakistan. The scientific community responded with skepticism bordering on disbelief. A whale with legs? A whale that lived in rivers? A whale that looked like a wolf? The skeptics had a point. Pachycetus did not look like any whale that had ever been imagined. The reconstructions published alongside the initial description showed a vaguely seal-like creature, semi-aquatic, sliding through coastal waters in pursuit of fish. This was speculation built on fragments, a skull, some teeth, pieces of jaw. The rest of the animal remained hidden in the Pakistani hills. It would take 20 years to find it. The complete picture emerged slowly, fossil by fossil, expedition by expedition. In 2001, Thewissen and his team announced the discovery of more complete Pachycetus material, limb bones, vertebrae, enough of the skeleton to finally understand how this animal had lived. The results were surprising. Pachycetus was not a sleek seal-like swimmer gliding through coastal waters. It was something far more awkward, far more transitional, far more obviously in between. The legs were fully functional, strong, weight-bearing limbs capable of supporting the animal on land, capable of running if necessary. The feet ended in small hooves, 4 toes on each foot, the ankle bones showing the distinctive double pulley shape that marks all artiodactyls, the even-toed ungulates that include deer and pigs and cattle. Pachycetus could walk. Pachycetus could probably run. On land, it would have moved like any other medium-sized mammal, perhaps a bit clumsily, perhaps with a strange rolling gait, but competently enough to escape predators or chase down prey. The surprise was in the bones themselves. They were dense, osteosclerotic in the technical terminology, thickened and heavy, with less internal space than you would expect in a terrestrial animal. Dense bones are a liability on land, where every extra gram of weight costs energy to carry. Dense bones are an advantage in water, where they provide ballast, helping an animal sink and stay submerged without constant effort. Pachycetus, it seemed, was living a double life, terrestrial enough to walk on 4 legs, aquatic enough to benefit from weighted bones. A creature caught precisely at the moment of transition, 1 foot on land, 1 foot in the water, committed fully to neither. The teeth offered another clue. Chemical analysis of the enamel, measuring the ratios of oxygen isotopes incorporated during growth, revealed that Pachycetus drank fresh water almost exclusively. This was not an ocean animal. This was not even a coastal animal. This was a river hunter, spending its days in the same murky, vegetation-choked waterways that still wind through Pakistan today. You can picture the scene. Dawn on the banks of an Eocene river, the air already warm, mist rising from the water. Pachycetus crouches at the edge, motionless, only its eyes and nostrils breaking the surface. The position is crocodilian, patient, designed for ambush. Fish move in the shallows, unaware of the predator watching from above. When Pachycetus strikes, it strikes fast. The long jaws snap closed. The teeth, sharp, serrated, built for gripping slippery prey, hold firm. The fish thrashes once, twice, then goes still. Pachycetus lifts its head, water streaming from its fur, and swallows. This is not whale behavior as you know it. There is no echolocation here, no bubble nets, no cooperative hunting strategies refined over millions of years. There is only a predator exploiting an ecological opportunity, using the water as a hunting ground the way a heron or a bear might use it. The difference is commitment. The heron returns to land. The bear wanders back into the forest. Pachycetus stayed, Generation after generation, the descendants of Maiacetus spent more time in the water. Their legs grew shorter, their tails grew stronger, their bodies grew more streamlined. The freshwater rivers gave way to brackish estuaries, and the estuaries gave way to the open coast, and the coast gave way to the sea. Maiacetus itself went extinct, a dead branch on the whale family tree. Its descendants did not. They kept swimming, kept adapting, kept pushing further from shore until the land was just a memory encoded in their bones. Gingerish is still excavating today. More than 40 years after that first puzzling skull, he continues to lead expeditions to Pakistan and Egypt, searching for new fossils, filling gaps in the cetacean record. His office at the University of Michigan is filled with casts and photographs, a timeline of whale evolution mapped in plaster and paper. The work has not gotten easier. Political instability has made fieldwork in Pakistan increasingly difficult. Funding is never certain. Each expedition requires months of planning, permits, logistics, the careful navigation of bureaucracies that have more pressing concerns than 50-million-year-old bones. Yet the fossils keep coming. Each new discovery refines the story, adds detail to the narrative, answers one question while raising three more. The transition from land to sea, it turns out, was not a single journey but a whole fleet of parallel experiments. Multiple lineages of early whales tried the water. Some succeeded, most failed. The survivors left descendants that would eventually fill every ocean on the planet. Maiacetus was one of the earliest experiments. Not the ancestor of all whales. The family tree is more complicated than that, but close enough to show us what that ancestor might have looked like. A wolf-sized carnivore with hooves on its feet and whale bones in its ears. A river hunter that had no idea it was standing at the beginning of something unprecedented. The complete skeleton of Maiacetus now occupies a place of honor in the evolutionary narrative. Textbooks reproduce it. Documentaries animate it. Museum displays show it mid-stride, frozen in the act of entering the water, one paw raised, the future unwritten. The rivers of Pakistan still flow. They carry sediment down from the mountains that did not exist when Maiacetus hunted their ancient predecessors. They wind through landscapes transformed by 50 million years of continental collision, erosion, and human alteration. The water is different, the fish are different, the predators are different. Yet something rhymes across the ages. A shape at the water's edge, eyes watching from the shallows. The patience of a hunter waiting for the right moment to strike. Maiacetus is gone, but the strategy it pioneered, the willingness to enter a new element, to exploit a niche that others had ignored, that strategy survived. It survived in Basilosaurus, the walking whale that came next. It survived in Rodhocetus and Maiacetus, the increasingly aquatic forms that followed. It survives today in every cetacean that breaches the surface to breathe, carrying the inheritance of a river hunter in every cell of its body. The transformation was accelerating. The next step would take the whales somewhere Maiacetus had never gone, into the space between worlds, because that's what shorelines really are. Not a line on a map, but a constant argument between two physics. On land, your weight belongs to your bones. In water, your weight can be negotiated. Every step toward the sea was a gamble with gravity, heat loss, breathing, hunting, childbirth, rules that had kept mammals safely terrestrial for tens of millions of years. Maiacetus had only flirted with that argument. It could enter the water, yes, but it still belonged to the land. The next animal would not simply visit the shallows, it would live in them. The name tells you everything and nothing. Basilosaurus natans, from the Latin, the walking whale that swims, a creature so perfectly intermediate that even its scientific name cannot decide what it was, walking or swimming, land or water, past or future. When Hans Thewissen found the first bones in 1992, buried in the coastal sediments of northern Pakistan, he knew immediately that he had discovered something important. The skeleton was remarkably complete: skull, jaws, most of the vertebral column, nearly all 4 limbs. Complete skeletons are rare in paleontology. Complete skeletons of transitional forms are almost miraculous. Ambulocetus was a miracle preserved in stone. The animal that emerged from Thewissen's reconstruction looked like nothing alive today. It was large, perhaps 3 meters from nose to tail, weighing somewhere around 300 kilograms. The body was long and sinuous, built for undulation rather than the stiff-spined running of terrestrial mammals. The head was enormous, a full meter of skull dominated by massive jaws lined with conical teeth. The eyes were small and positioned high, angled upward like a crocodile's. The nostrils sat at the tip of the snout, not yet migrated toward the top of the head. The limbs told the most interesting story. The front legs were relatively short, ending in broad, paddle-like feet that would have been clumsy on land but powerful in water. The hind legs were larger, more muscular, attached to a pelvis still capable of bearing the animal's weight. The feet of those hind legs were enormous, elongated, probably webbed, designed to push water backward with each stroke. Ambulocetus could walk. The bones prove it. The hip joints, the knee joints, the ankle joints, all were functional, all were capable of supporting the animal during terrestrial locomotion. If you had seen Ambulocetus hauling itself onto a riverbank, you would have recognized the movement. Awkward, perhaps. Labored, certainly. But walking nonetheless. Ambulocetus could also swim. The tail vertebrae show increasing flexibility toward the tip, suggesting a powerful up and down motion that would have propelled the animal through water. The hind feet, with their elongated toes, would have acted like twin propellers, adding thrust to each stroke. The overall swimming style would have resembled a modern otter, sinuous, efficient, graceful in a way that the land-bound form could never be. Here was the creature that skeptics had demanded. Here was the walking whale, the literal missing link between terrestrial mammals and the cetaceans of the modern ocean. Here was proof that the transition had happened exactly as evolutionary theory predicted, gradually, incrementally, one adaptation at a time. Thewissen named it well. The walking whale that swims, a creature that belonged to 2 worlds and had not yet chosen between them. The sediments where Ambulocetus was found tell their own story. The rocks are coastal, deposited in an environment where rivers met the sea. Fossilized mangrove roots thread through the layers. Marine mollusks lie alongside freshwater snails. The chemistry of the sediments indicates brackish water, a mixing zone where salt and fresh mingled in a constantly shifting gradient. This was estuary country, the kind of environment that still exists today along tropical coastlines, where the boundary between land and water blurs into a maze of channels and mud flats and flooded forests. The kind of environment where an animal comfortable in both worlds would have thrived. Ambulocetus lived in this in-between space. The isotopes in its teeth confirm it, a mixture of freshwater and saltwater signatures indicating an animal that moved freely between river and sea, following the fish, following the opportunities, going wherever the hunting was good. The teeth themselves speak of diet, large, conical, interlocking when the jaws closed. These were teeth designed for catching and holding prey, not for chewing. Ambulocetus swallowed its meals whole or in large chunks, the way crocodiles do, the way seals do, the way modern toothed whales still do. The prey was almost certainly fish, though Ambulocetus would not have been picky. Anything that fit in those massive jaws was potential food. The hunting strategy can be reconstructed from anatomy. Those high-set eyes, angled upward, that crocodilian skull, long and low, the ability to remain motionless in murky water, invisible from above, waiting for something edible to swim within range. Ambulocetus was an ambush predator, patient and deadly, striking from below with a speed that its bulky body seemed to contradict. You can imagine the scene: a tidal channel at dusk, the water brown with sediment, the mangrove roots casting shadows across the surface. Something moves beneath, a shape darker than the surrounding murk, absolutely still except for the slow motion of water through its gills. No, not gills. Nostrils held just above the waterline, drawing breath in a rhythm so slow it seems almost geological. A fish swims too close. The attack is explosive. The massive head lunges upward, jaws gaping, water erupting in a spray of foam and debris. The teeth close. The fish spasms once, then goes limp. The whole sequence takes less than a second. Ambulocetus sinks back beneath the surface, adjusting the fish in its jaws, tilting its head back to let gravity assist the swallowing. The water settles. The mangroves return to silence. The predator resumes its vigil. This is not the whale you know. There is no song here, no migration across ocean basins, no complex social structure passed down through generations. There is only hunger and patience, and the endless cycling of predator and prey. Ambulocetus was not yet a whale in any meaningful sense. It was something older, something simpler, something that had found a way to make the water pay. The transition from Maiacetus to Ambulocetus represents roughly 3 million years of evolution. In that time, the whale lineage had transformed dramatically. The body had lengthened, the tail had strengthened, the feet had become paddles. The commitment to water had deepened from occasional to habitual to nearly obligate. Yet Ambulocetus still returned to land. The evidence is indirect but compelling. Female mammals must give birth somewhere, and the pelvis of Ambulocetus, while reduced compared to fully terrestrial animals, was still connected to the spine in a way that would have allowed weight-bearing. Modern seals and sea lions haul out onto beaches to give birth. Ambulocetus probably did the same, dragging itself onto mudflats or sandbars to deliver its young, nursing them in the shallows until they were strong enough to swim. This detail matters more than it might seem. Birth on land meant that Ambulocetus remained tied to the shore. It could swim for hours, could hunt across miles of coastal water, could dive to depths that Maiacetus had never reached. Yet it always had to come back. The umbilical cord that connected it to the land was biological, literal, unbreakable. That cord would eventually be cut. Future generations would learn to give birth in open water, to nurse underwater, to live entire lives without touching solid ground. The full oceanic existence that we associate with whales was still millions of years in the future. Ambulocetus stood at the threshold of that future, looking out across the water, unable to see what was coming. It knew only the estuary, only the rhythm of tides and seasons, only the endless hunt through murky shallows. The open ocean was out there, beyond the river mouths, beyond the coastal reefs, vast and empty and waiting. The walking whale was not ready for it. Not yet. Its descendants would be. The fossils of Ambulocetus are now housed in museums around the world. Casts of the skeleton appear in exhibitions from Washington to Tokyo, always positioned in that characteristic pose. Body low, jaws agape, caught forever in the act of lunging toward prey. The image has become iconic, reproduced in countless textbooks and documentaries, the visual shorthand for whale evolution. The Eocene still works on early cetaceans, still publishes papers refining the details of their anatomy and behavior, still travels to Pakistan when conditions allow. The site where Ambulocetus was found has yielded other treasures, more complete skeletons, new species, fragments that hint at diversity we are only beginning to understand. The estuary where Ambulocetus hunted no longer exists. The Tethys Sea has closed, the continents have shifted, the coastlines have retreated and advanced and retreated again. The mangroves are gone, the fish are gone, the murky channels have been replaced by desert or farmland or city. What remains is bone. Bone and the story it tells of an animal caught between two worlds, mastering both, committing to neither. The walking whale that swam, the swimmer that walked, a 3-million-year experiment in having it both ways. The experiment was about to end. The next generation of whales would make a choice that Ambulocetus had deferred. They would let go of the land entirely. The sea was calling, and finally something was ready to answer. There's a moment in every major evolutionary leap where the old compromises stop working. Amphibious life is a clever trick, but it's also exhausting. On land, you overheat or dehydrate. In water, you lose heat too fast. Your ears don't know which medium to trust. Your limbs are asked to be both oars and legs. Even pregnancy becomes a logistical problem, because giving birth on land demands gravity, but giving birth in water demands buoyancy. You can't optimize for both without paying a price. Ambulocetus paid it, brilliantly, for a while. But evolution doesn't reward almost. It rewards commitment. To become truly oceanic, the whales would have to redesign the machinery of motion. Not just learn to swim better, learn to stop walking. Turn weight-bearing legs into steering surfaces. Let the spine become an engine. Let the pelvis loosen its grip on the skeleton. Let the shoreline become a memory. And in the fossil record, we can watch that decision happen in a way that feels uncomfortably intimate. She died giving birth. We know this because her baby was still inside her, fossilized in the moment of delivery, head facing toward the birth canal, ready to enter a world it would never see. The mother's skeleton curled around the fetus in a posture that speaks across 47 million years, protective, instinctive, mammalian in a way that transcends the strangeness of her form. Philip Gingerich found her in 2000 in the Habib Rahi limestone of Pakistan's Punjab province. He had been excavating early whales for 25 years by then, had grown accustomed to the fragmentary nature of the fossil record, the frustrating incompleteness of most specimens. This skeleton was different. This skeleton was a story. He named her Maiacetus inuus, the mother whale. Maiacetus lived approximately 47 million years ago, roughly a million years after Ambulocetus disappeared from the fossil record. In that million years, the whale lineage had continued its transformation. The body had grown more streamlined. The hind limbs had shortened further. The tail had developed into a more powerful propulsive organ. The commitment to water had deepened from habitual to nearly complete. Yet Maiacetus still came ashore. The position of her fetus proved it. In all modern whales, babies are born tail first. This is not arbitrary. A tail-first delivery allows the newborn to remain in the birth canal, still receiving oxygen through the umbilical cord until the last possible moment. The instant the head emerges, the calf must swim to the surface and take its first breath. Head-first delivery in open water would mean drowning before birth was complete. The fetus inside Maiacetus was positioned head first. The only way this makes sense is if Maiacetus gave birth on land, the way seals and sea lions do today, the way terrestrial mammals have always done. Head-first delivery works fine when there is air to breathe. This single detail, the orientation of an unborn calf inside a 47-million-year-old skeleton, tells us something profound about the pace of evolutionary change. Maiacetus was more aquatic than Ambulocetus. It spent more time in the water, hunted more effectively in the water, probably preferred the water in every way that mattered. Yet, it still needed the land for the most fundamental act of biological continuity. The cord had not yet been cut. Gingerich's team found a male Maiacetus at the same site, slightly larger than the female, with more robust teeth. The sexual dimorphism suggested a social structure of some kind, perhaps competition between males for access to females, perhaps something more complex. We cannot know the details. Social behavior does not fossilize. What fossilizes is bone, and bone can only hint at the lives that animated it. The bones of Maiacetus hint at a creature increasingly comfortable in its aquatic element. The front limbs had flattened into something approaching flippers, though the individual finger bones were still distinct, still potentially capable of grasping. The hind limbs were smaller than in Basilosaurus, but still functional, still attached to the spine through a working hip joint, still useful for maneuvering in shallow water or hauling out onto shore. The tail told the real story. The vertebrae showed adaptations for powerful dorsoventral movement, the up and down motion that modern whales use to drive their flukes through the water. Maiacetus probably did not have true flukes yet. Those would come later. What it had was the muscular foundation, the skeletal architecture, the evolutionary raw material from which flukes would eventually emerge. Swimming was no longer a secondary skill. Swimming was becoming the primary mode of existence. Rodhocetus lived at roughly the same time as Maiacetus, perhaps slightly earlier, in the warm coastal waters of what is now Pakistan. Its fossils emerged from the green shales of the Damanda Formation, sediments deposited in deeper water than those that yielded Basilosaurus, evidence that the whale lineage was venturing further from shore, testing the limits of its aquatic adaptation. The name means Rodho whale, after the Rodho mountain range near the discovery site. The animal it designates was perhaps 4 meters long, larger than Maiacetus, with a body increasingly specialized for sustained swimming. The hind limbs of Rodhocetus were reduced but not vestigial. The feet were large and paddle-like, still connected to functional hip joints, still capable of contributing to locomotion. The ankle bones retained the double pulley shape that marked Rodhocetus as an artiodactyl, a cousin of deer and pigs and hippos. The genetic kinship with modern even-toed ungulates, confirmed decades later through molecular analysis, was already written in those ankle bones 47 million years ago. The front limbs had transformed more dramatically. The individual bones of the hand were shortening, flattening, fusing together in ways that reduced flexibility but increased surface area. A flipper was emerging from what had once been a grasping paw. The fingers were still present. They are still present in modern whales, hidden beneath the skin of the flipper, but their function was changing from manipulation to propulsion. The spine of Rodhocetus showed another critical adaptation. The sacral vertebrae, which in terrestrial mammals fused together to form a rigid connection between spine and pelvis, were becoming unfused. The pelvis was loosening its grip on the backbone, preparing for a future in which it would serve no weight-bearing function at all. This loosening allowed greater flexibility in the lower back, greater power in the tail stroke, greater efficiency in the undulating motion that was replacing leg-driven swimming. Rodhocetus was not yet fully aquatic. The evidence suggests it could still move on land, could still haul out to rest or give birth or escape marine predators. The hip joints worked, the legs functioned. The connection to the terrestrial world remained intact. Yet the trajectory was clear. Each generation a little more streamlined, a little more efficient in the water, a little less comfortable on shore. The advantages of aquatic life, abundant food, freedom from land-based predators, access to new ecological niches were pulling the whale lineage deeper into the ocean. The disadvantages of terrestrial existence, the awkwardness of a body increasingly ill-suited to walking, the vulnerability of hauling out on exposed beaches, were pushing from the other direction. Evolution does not plan, does not anticipate, does not see the end point of a trajectory. It only responds to immediate pressures favoring whatever works slightly better than the alternative. For the ancestors of whales, slightly better increasingly meant more aquatic. The legs that Maiacetus had used to chase fish through shallow rivers were becoming an encumbrance. The lungs that Basilosaurus had filled with air between ambush attacks were becoming the limiting factor on dive time. The entire architecture of terrestrial mammalian existence, weight-bearing skeleton, air-breathing metabolism, live birth followed by nursing, was being renegotiated for a new medium. Maiacetus and Rodhocetus stood at the midpoint of this renegotiation, still tethered to land by the demands of reproduction, still capable of locomotion in both worlds, still recognizable as mammals to any observer who looked closely enough. Their descendants would not be so recognizable. The next step in whale evolution would produce animals that looked for the first time like the whales we know, animals that had finally answered the ocean's call. The crossing was almost complete. The fossils of this transitional period, the protocetids, as scientists call them, have been found across an astonishing geographic range: Pakistan and India, where the earliest specimens emerged; Egypt, where the Tethys Sea deposited layer after layer of whale-bearing sediments; Nigeria, where fragmentary remains suggest a spreading population; and most surprisingly, Peru. Maiacetus pacificus was discovered in 2011 on the southern coast of Peru in marine sediments dating to approximately 43 million years ago. The name means the traveling whale that reached the Pacific. It was not chosen carelessly. Before Maiacetus, scientists believed that early whales had remained confined to the Tethys region for millions of years, only spreading to other oceans after they had become fully aquatic. Maiacetus rewrote that assumption. Here was a four-legged whale, still capable of walking on land, that had somehow crossed the Atlantic Ocean and established itself on the Pacific coast of South America. The crossing would have been easier then. 43 million years ago, the Atlantic was narrower than it is today. The distance between Africa and South America perhaps half what it currently measures. Surface currents flowed westward along the equator, providing assistance to anything swimming in that direction. The journey was possible. The journey apparently had been made. Olivier Lambert, the Belgian paleontologist who led the study of Maiacetus, was struck by the completeness of the skeleton. Jaw, vertebrae, ribs, pelvis, and crucially, all four limbs. The anatomy confirmed what the location implied. This was an amphibious whale, capable of locomotion on land and in water, that had traveled thousands of kilometers from its ancestral home to colonize a new ocean. The implications rippled outward. If Maiacetus could cross the Atlantic, other protocetids could too. The early radiation of whales was not a local phenomenon confined to the Indo-Pakistani region. It was a global expansion, amphibious pioneers spreading along coastlines and across ocean basins, carrying the whale body plan to every corner of the marine world. By the time the protocetids finished their expansion, the stage was set for the next transformation. The fully aquatic whales, the Basilosaurids, would emerge from this widespread, experimentally diverse lineage. They would abandon the land entirely. They would grow to enormous sizes. They would become, for the first time, the Leviathans. Maiacetus and Rodhocetus and Maiacetus would not witness this transformation. They were transitional forms, bridges between worlds, and bridges are meant to be crossed, not inhabited. Their role in the story was to connect what came before to what came after, to demonstrate that the journey from wolf-sized river hunter to ocean-spanning giant was not a single leap but a series of steps, each one building on the last. The steps had been taken, the legs were becoming flippers, the tail was becoming a fluke, the nostrils were creeping backward along the skull, millimeter by millimeter, generation by generation, heading toward a destination that would not be reached for millions of years. The whales were learning to let go. And far across the ancient ocean, on coastlines that no longer exist, something enormous was beginning to stir. Whales were not the only animals being reshaped by the new oceans. While one lineage was solving the problem of becoming water, another was already fully aquatic and had the luxury of doing what the sea does best, making things big. When land is the limit, size is a burden. When water carries you, size becomes a weapon, a strategy, a throne. The early whales were still apprentices. They were learning breath, buoyancy, navigation, the brutal arithmetic of oxygen. Somewhere out there, in warm Eocene seas, the masters were already waiting. Not fish, not crocodiles, not dinosaurs returned from the grave. Something older in spirit, something built for drowning other giants. The bones were so large that the first scientists to study them assumed they belonged to a reptile. In 1834, workers digging in Louisiana discovered enormous vertebrae buried in the coastal sediments. Each bone was as long as a man's forearm, dense and heavy, clearly from something massive. More bones emerged as excavation continued. Ribs, jaw fragments, teeth the size of human fists. Whatever had died here had been a giant. Richard Harlan, a Philadelphia physician with a passion for natural history, examined the specimens and reached what seemed like the only reasonable conclusion. These were the remains of an ancient sea serpent, a marine reptile, similar to the plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs that had been discovered in Europe. He named the creature Basilosaurus, king lizard, and published his findings with confidence. The confidence was misplaced. Within 5 years, the English anatomist Richard Owen had re-examined the fossils and noticed something Harlan had missed. The teeth were differentiated. The front teeth were conical, designed for grasping. The back teeth were serrated, designed for cutting. This pattern, incisors and molars serving different functions, is found only in mammals. Reptiles have uniform teeth. Whatever Basilosaurus was, it was not a lizard. Owen proposed renaming the creature Zeuglodon, meaning yoke tooth, but scientific nomenclature follows strict rules of priority. The first valid name sticks even when it becomes misleading. Basilosaurus remains Basilosaurus to this day, a mammal forever misnamed as a reptile, carrying the confusion of its discovery into perpetuity. The confusion was understandable. Nothing in the experience of 19th century naturalists had prepared them for what Basilosaurus actually was. A whale with a body like a serpent. A mammal that had abandoned everything recognizable about mammalian form to become something unprecedented. A creature that had completed the transformation from land to sea and emerged as something monstrous, beautiful, and utterly alien. Basilosaurus was enormous. Modern reconstructions suggest a length of 15 to 18 meters, roughly the size of a large humpback whale. The body was elongated and sinuous, nothing like the compact, torpedo-shaped cetaceans we know today. The vertebral column had stretched dramatically, each bone lengthening beyond what physics would seem to allow, producing an animal that moved through the water like a living ribbon. The skull was relatively small for such a large body, perhaps 1.5 meters long, armed with teeth that told of a predatory lifestyle. The front teeth were conical pegs designed for seizing prey. The rear teeth were triangular blades designed for slicing flesh. Basilosaurus did not filter feed like modern baleen whales. It did not echolocate like modern dolphins. It hunted, killed, and consumed other large marine animals. And then there were the legs. They were tiny. Absurdly, almost comically tiny, perhaps 30 centimeters long, on an animal that stretched 18 meters from nose to tail. The bones were all there: femur, tibia, fibula, ankle, toes, a complete hind limb perfectly formed, attached to a vestigial pelvis that had no connection to the spine. The legs could not have supported any weight. They could not have contributed to swimming. They were evolutionary leftovers, remnants of the walking ancestors that Basilosaurus had left behind. Those tiny legs are among the most powerful pieces of evidence for whale evolution. They serve no function. They cost metabolic energy to grow and maintain. Natural selection should have eliminated them entirely, and eventually it did in the descendants of Basilosaurus. Their persistence in this transitional form demonstrates that evolution is not a designer working toward perfection. It is a tinkerer modifying what already exists, leaving traces of history in every body it shapes. Basilosaurus had completed the journey. It was fully aquatic, incapable of surviving on land, committed to the ocean in every aspect of its anatomy. The legs it still carried were ghosts, memories of a terrestrial past encoded in bone. The future belonged to descendants that would lose even these vestiges, streamlining their bodies into the forms we recognize today. Basilosaurus did not swim alone. In the same sediments that yield Basilosaurus fossils, paleontologists regularly find the remains of a smaller whale called Dorudon. The two species lived side by side in the warm, shallow seas of the late Eocene, sharing the same waters, hunting the same prey, leaving their bones in the same geological formations. Dorudon was perhaps 5 meters long, roughly a third the length of Basilosaurus. Its body was more compact, more conventionally whale-shaped, lacking the serpentine elongation that made its larger cousin so distinctive. The skull was proportionally larger, the snout shorter, the overall appearance closer to what we think of when we imagine an ancient whale. For decades, paleontologists assumed that Dorudon fossils were simply juvenile Basilosaurus. The size difference seemed to support this interpretation. Young animals are smaller than adults. Perhaps these compact skeletons represented Basilosaurus calves that had died before reaching maturity. The discovery of truly juvenile Basilosaurus specimens shattered this assumption. Baby Basilosaurus looked like miniature versions of adult Basilosaurus, elongated, serpentine, unmistakable. Dorudon was something different. A separate species, a distinct lineage, a parallel experiment in fully aquatic whale design. The two species almost certainly interacted. Bite marks on juvenile Dorudon skulls match the dentition of Basilosaurus perfectly. The king lizard, it seems, was not above eating its smaller relatives. The warm Eocene seas were a dangerous place, where being a whale did not protect you from other whales. This predatory relationship offers a glimpse into the ecological complexity of the ancient ocean. Basilosaurus occupied the apex predator niche, hunting everything from fish to sharks to other marine mammals. Dorudon occupied a middle tier, large enough to be a formidable predator in its own right, small enough to be prey for the giants that shared its world. The community structure was beginning to resemble the modern ocean, where orcas hunt seals and seals hunt fish, and the hierarchy of predation creates a web of relationships spanning the entire marine ecosystem. The diversity was remarkable. Basilosaurus and Dorudon were not the only fully aquatic whales of the late Eocene. Dozens of species have been identified from this period, ranging from giants to relative dwarfs, occupying niches from shallow coastal waters to the open ocean. The whale radiation had exploded. The empty ecological space left by the marine reptiles of the Mesozoic was finally being filled. The best place in the world to witness this explosion is a desert valley in Egypt. Wadi Al-Hitan, the Valley of the Whales, lies in the western desert, about 150 kilometers southwest of Cairo. The landscape is austere and beautiful, carved by wind and time into a maze of sandstone formations that glow orange and gold under the desert sun. Nothing about it suggests the ocean. Nothing about it suggests life. Yet the valley floor is littered with bones. More than 500 whale skeletons have been documented in Wadi Al-Hitan, making it the richest site for Eocene cetacean fossils anywhere on Earth. The skeletons lie exposed on the surface, weathering out of the rock at a pace that allows paleontologists to simply walk through the desert collecting specimens. Basilosaurus here, Dorudon there, the occasional sea cow or crocodile or shark scattered among the whale bones like supporting characters in a drama dominated by cetaceans. UNESCO designated Wadi Al-Hitan a World Heritage Site in 2005, recognizing its unique value for understanding whale evolution. The Egyptian government built a museum and visitor center, installed walkways among the most spectacular skeletons, created an experience that allows tourists to wander through the ancient ocean floor while surrounded by the remains of its inhabitants. The site works because of a geological accident. 40 million years ago, this region lay beneath the shallow waters of the Tethys Sea. The warm, productive waters supported abundant life, including large populations of whales. When these animals died, their bodies sank to the sea floor and were rapidly buried by sediment, protecting the bones from scavengers and decay. Over millions of years, the sea retreated, the seafloor became land, and erosion began exposing what had been hidden. The preservation is extraordinary. Complete articulated skeletons still lying in the positions where the animals died, stomach contents revealing last meals, fetal bones inside pregnant females. The level of detail allows reconstructions that go beyond anatomy into behavior, ecology, and life history. In 2015, excavators uncovered a Basilosaurus skeleton with the remains of its prey still fossilized inside its stomach cavity. The prey included fish, sharks, and, remarkably, a juvenile Dorudon. The evidence of predation that paleontologists had inferred from bite marks was confirmed in the most direct way possible. Basilosaurus had eaten this Dorudon, and then both had been preserved together for 40 million years, predator and prey united in death. Hesham Salem, an Egyptian paleontologist who has worked extensively at Wadi Al-Hitan, describes walking through the valley as something close to time travel. The bones are so abundant, so well preserved, so clearly positioned in their original context that the ancient sea comes alive around you. You can see where the animals lived, how they died, what relationships connected them to each other and to the broader ecosystem. The valley continues to yield discoveries. In 2023, Salem's team announced the identification of Tutsetus rayanensis, a new species of basilosaurid whale recovered from sediments near Wadi Al-Hitan. At roughly 2.5 meters long and 187 kilograms, Tutsetus was the smallest basilosaurid ever discovered, a miniature version of the giants that dominated the late Eocene seas. The name honors both the site and the most famous king in Egyptian history. Tutsetus combines Tut for the pharaoh Tutankhamun with cetus, the Latin word for whale. The species name, rayanensis, references Wadi El Rayan, the protected area where the fossil was found. A tiny whale named for a young king, both preserved forever in the rocks of Egypt. Tutsetus matters because it demonstrates the diversity of early whale evolution. The basilosaurids were not a single lineage marching toward modern forms. They were a radiation, an explosion of experimentation, with different species occupying different niches and reaching different sizes. Some became serpentine giants like Basilosaurus, others remained compact and dolphin-like, others shrank to sizes barely larger than the walking ancestors from which they had descended. Evolution does not follow a single path. It explores every available option, fills every available niche, produces forms that succeed and forms that fail. The basilosaurids explored the possibilities of fully aquatic whale existence. Most of those explorations led to dead ends. One lineage, just one, would give rise to the whales that fill our oceans today. The Eocene ended approximately 34 million years ago in a wave of extinction that reshaped the planet's ecosystems. Global temperatures dropped. ocean circulation patterns shifted. The warm, shallow seas that had nurtured the early whale radiation cooled and changed. Basilosaurus did not survive the transition. Its serpentine body plan, perfectly adapted to the warm Tethys, proved unsuited to the new conditions. The species vanished from the fossil record, leaving no descendants, its 30-million-year lineage ending in geological silence. Darudan fared better, or rather, some lineage close to Darudan fared better. The exact relationships remain debated. From the compact, dolphin-shaped basilosaurids emerged the ancestors of the two great groups of modern whales. The toothed whales, which would develop echolocation and diversify into dolphins, porpoises, sperm whales, and orcas. The baleen whales, which would evolve filter feeding and grow to the largest sizes the animal kingdom has ever produced. The serpent kings were gone. The age of the modern cetaceans was about to begin. The ocean had claimed the whales completely. There would be no more hauling out on beaches, no more giving birth on land, no more connection to the terrestrial world except the need to surface and breathe. The transformation that had begun with a terrified Indohus diving into a stream was complete. What came next would be diversification on a scale the whale lineage had never seen. The empty oceans were waiting. The whales were ready to fill them. But evolution doesn't just make whales. It starts playing with the knobs: speed, hearing, echolocation, later, deep diving, open ocean endurance, and, occasionally, the most primal lever of all, mass. In water, weight behaves differently. On land, being enormous is a constant negotiation with gravity. Every step a tax. In the sea, the planet loosens its grip. A body can become a floating continent, a moving bunker, a living vault of fat and bone. Sometimes, size isn't about hunting. Sometimes, it's about surviving. Outlasting predators, conserving heat, storing energy, crossing whole basins without ever seeing land. And once the whale lineage committed fully to the ocean, it gained access to something rare in the history of life: the permission to become truly, absurdly heavy. The bones were impossibly dense. Mario Urbina had been collecting fossils in Peru's Ica Desert for decades, walking the same sun-blasted valleys where the Andes meet the Pacific, where ancient seabeds now lie exposed under a sky that almost never sees rain. He knew what whale bones looked like. He knew how much they should weigh. These bones were different. When Urbina tried to lift a single vertebra in 2010, he could barely move it. The bone was solid, almost metal-like, lacking the spongy internal structure that makes most whale skeletons relatively light for their size. Whatever animal this vertebra had belonged to, it had been built like nothing Urbina had ever encountered. It took more than a decade to excavate the specimen. The bones were scattered across a hillside, eroded out of 40-million-year-old marine sediments, each piece requiring careful extraction and transport down treacherous slopes. By the time the work was finished, the team had recovered 13 vertebrae, 4 ribs, and part of a hip bone. Not a complete skeleton, not even close, but enough to attempt a reconstruction. The reconstruction defied belief. In August 2023, an international team led by Olivier Lambert published their analysis in the journal Nature. They named the creature Rodhocetus colossus, the colossal whale from Peru. The name was not hyperbole. Based on the size and density of the recovered bones, the team estimated that Rodhocetus might have weighed between 85 and 340 metric tons. The upper end of that range would make Rodhocetus the heaviest animal that has ever lived. The blue whale, the current record holder, reaches maximum weights of around 170 tons. The largest dinosaurs, Argentinosaurus, Patagotitan, topped out at perhaps 70 tons. Even the most massive marine reptiles of the Mesozoic fell far short of what Rodhocetus might have achieved. If the high estimates are correct, This 40-million-year-old whale exceeded every other animal in Earth's history by a substantial margin. The estimates come with significant uncertainty. Weight cannot be measured directly from fossils. It must be inferred from skeletal dimensions using mathematical models derived from living animals. The problem is that no living animal resembles Maiacetus. Its bones were so dense, so unlike anything in the modern ocean, that the standard models might not apply. Travis Park, a whale evolution researcher at the Natural History Museum in London, urged caution when the discovery was announced. The density of Maiacetus bones, he noted, resembles the bones of manatees and dugongs, slow-moving herbivores that use their heavy skeletons as ballast while grazing on seafloor vegetation. If Maiacetus lived like a manatee rather than like a whale, its body mass estimates might need significant revision. The debate continues. Some researchers accept the high estimates and marvel at a creature that dwarfed even the blue whale. Others argue for more conservative figures, placing Rodhocetus in the range of modern great whales rather than dramatically above them. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, awaiting the discovery of more complete specimens that could resolve the uncertainty. What no one disputes is that Maiacetus was strange, profoundly, fundamentally strange, even by the standards of early whale evolution. The strangeness begins with the bones themselves. Normal whale skeletons are lightweight. The internal structure of whale bones is spongy and porous, filled with oil and marrow, designed to provide buoyancy in an animal that must surface regularly to breathe. A blue whale's skeleton accounts for only about 17% of its total body mass. The rest is muscle, blubber, and organs, soft tissue that helps the animal float. Maiacetus inverted this ratio. Its bones were pachyosteosclerotic, a technical term meaning they were both abnormally thick and abnormally dense. The internal cavities that should have been filled with spongy tissue were instead solid bone, heavy and compact. The skeleton alone, Lambert's team estimated, weighed between 5 and 8 tons, 2 to 3 times heavier than the skeleton of a blue whale, despite Maiacetus being considerably shorter. This skeletal density served a purpose. Heavy bones act as ballast, helping an animal sink and stay submerged without expending energy to swim downward. Modern sirenians, manatees, and dugongs have similarly dense bones, and they use them to maintain neutral buoyancy while feeding on underwater vegetation. They drift along the bottom, grazing on seagrass, their heavy skeletons holding them in place against the current. Maiacetus, the evidence suggests, lived a similar lifestyle. Not a pursuit predator like Basilosaurus chasing prey through open water. Not a filter feeder like modern baleen whales, gulping huge volumes of water to strain out tiny organisms. Something slower, more sedentary, more alien to our image of what a whale should be. Picture it. A shallow coastal bay, 40 million years ago. The water is warm and murky, thick with suspended sediment. Seagrass beds carpet the bottom, swaying gently in the current. And moving through this underwater meadow, grazing like an enormous aquatic cow, is a whale the size of a building. Maiacetus would have been almost unrecognizable as a cetacean. The elongated body plan of Basilosaurus inherited from the same basilosaurid ancestors, but bloated, thickened, weighing down by bones that seemed designed for a creature that never needed to move quickly. The tiny vestigial hind limbs, still present at this stage of whale evolution, dangling uselessly from a pelvis that served no locomotive function. The head, we do not have the skull, so this is speculation, probably small relative to the massive body, equipped with teeth or perhaps baleen suited for whatever food source sustained such an enormous animal. The lifestyle would have been almost mammalian, slow, patient, methodical, rising to the surface every few minutes to breathe, then sinking back to the bottom to continue feeding. No songs echoing across ocean basins, no complex social structures, no migration routes spanning thousands of kilometers. Just a vast, quiet presence, drifting through coastal shallows, converting plant matter into the largest body the planet had ever produced. This is speculation. We do not have enough of Wadi to know its diet with certainty. The patchy osteosclerotic bones suggest bottom-dwelling habits, but bottom dwellers can eat many things: vegetation, invertebrates, carrion, slow-moving fish. Until someone finds a Wadi skull with preserved stomach contents, the question of what fueled this improbable giant will remain open. The discovery of Wadi arrived at an extraordinary moment in paleontology. The same week that Lambert's team announced the largest whale ever found, Hesham Salam's team in Egypt announced the smallest. Tutsitus ryanensis, the tiny basilosaurid from Wadi Al-Hitan, weighed perhaps 187 kilograms. Perricitus colossus, at the high end of estimates, weighed nearly 2,000 times more. Both animals lived at roughly the same time during the late Eocene, when the basilosaurid whales dominated the world's oceans. Both belonged to the same broad family, descendants of the walking ancestors that had entered the water 50 million years ago. Yet they had diverged so dramatically in size and lifestyle that they might as well have been different classes of animal. This is what evolutionary radiation looks like. A lineage enters a new environment and explodes into diversity, filling every available niche, testing every possible variation on its basic body plan. Some variations succeed and leave descendants. Others reach dead ends, their experiments preserved only in the fossil record. The basilosaurids tried everything: giants and dwarfs, serpentine bodies and compact forms, apex predators and gentle grazers. The modern ocean remembers only the lineages that survived. Maiacetus did not survive. Its lineage left no descendants that we can identify, no genetic legacy in the whales that swim today. The patchy osteosclerotic body plan, whatever advantages it offered in the warm, shallow seas of the Eocene, proved unsuited to the cooler, deeper oceans that followed. The heaviest animal in Earth's history vanished, leaving only scattered bones in a Peruvian desert to testify that it had ever existed. The irony is hard to escape. Blue whales, the animals we consider the largest ever to live, may have been surpassed by a creature that looked nothing like them. The record for maximum size may belong not to a sleek, streamlined ocean traveler, but to a bloated, bottom-dwelling grazer that spent its days drifting through seagrass beds. The icon of marine gigantism may need to share its throne with an animal that most people have never heard of. Or perhaps not. The uncertainty in Wadi size estimates leaves room for the blue whale to retain its title. Future discoveries, a complete skeleton, better preservation, more data points, might revise the calculations downward. Science is provisional, always subject to correction, always willing to update its conclusions in light of new evidence. What remains certain is that whale evolution produced extremes we are only beginning to understand. The transition from land to sea, which seemed like a single story when it began with Rodhocetus and Maiacetus, turns out to have been 1,000 stories, 1,000 experiments in aquatic existence, each one different, each one pushing the boundaries of what a mammal could become. The Ica Desert still holds secrets. Mario Urbina continues to walk its valleys, scanning the eroded hillsides for the telltale shapes of bone. Other collectors work alongside him, professionals and amateurs united by the knowledge that this barren landscape contains one of the richest fossil deposits in the world. The same geological forces that exposed Maiacetus are exposing other specimens, other species, other chapters in the story of whale evolution. The Pacific coast of South America has become a crucial site for understanding how whales spread across the globe. Maiacetus, the four-legged whale that crossed the Atlantic. Reshaped, the giant that defies categorization. Countless other species, named and unnamed, representing the diversity of a lineage that colonized every ocean on the planet within 15 million years of leaving land. The bones emerge slowly, weathering out of the rock at a pace measured in decades. Each discovery adds to the picture, refines the narrative, answers questions while raising new ones. The story of whale evolution is not finished. It is being written in real time, fossil by fossil, paper by paper, the ancient past yielding its secrets to the patient attention of the present. Wadi was a giant, perhaps the greatest giant the animal kingdom has ever produced. Its bones lay hidden for 40 million years, waiting for someone to notice their impossible weight, to ask what kind of creature could have needed a skeleton built like iron. Now we know, and knowing, we understand something new about the possibilities of life. The ocean did not produce giants only through speed and streamlining, and the pursuit of prey through open water. It also produced giants through slowness, through patience, through the accumulation of mass in bodies designed to sink rather than swim. Evolution finds every path, even the paths we never imagined. The whales had conquered size, now they would conquer diversity. The next chapter in their story would split the lineage in two, sending one branch toward echolocation and hunting, the other toward filter feeding and song. The Great Divide was coming. 34 million years ago, the world changed. The Eocene epoch, which had sustained the warmest global temperatures in 60 million years, came to an abrupt end. Antarctica, which had been covered in temperate forests, began to freeze. Ice sheets formed for the first time since the age of dinosaurs. Ocean currents reorganized as the circumpolar current isolated the southern continent, creating a refrigerator at the bottom of the world that would chill the planet for the next 34 million years and counting. The warm, shallow seas that had nurtured the Basilosaurids cooled and deepened. The Tethys, already shrinking as India collided with Asia, continued its slow death. The ecological stage on which Basilosaurus and Rodhocetus and Maiacetus had performed was being dismantled. The scenery struck, the lights dimmed. The great whales of the Eocene did not survive the transition. Basilosaurus vanished. The giant grazers vanished. The serpentine forms and the experimental body plans, all the diversity that had flourished in the warm, productive waters, gone, or nearly so, within a few million years. What emerged from the wreckage was something new, something that would prove more durable, more diverse, more successful than anything the whale lineage had yet produced. From the survivors of the Eocene extinction came two great branches, two fundamentally different approaches to being a whale, two answers to the question of how to make a living in the transformed ocean. The toothed whales, the baleen whales, Rodhocetus and Maiacetus, hunters and filter feeders, echolocators and singers. The Great Divide. The toothed whales kept their teeth. This seems obvious, the name says as much, but the significance runs deeper than nomenclature. Teeth are weapons. Teeth are tools for catching, killing, and processing prey. An animal that keeps its teeth is an animal that intends to hunt, to pursue individual prey items, to engage in the ancient predator-prey dynamic that has driven evolution since the first cells learned to consume each other. The ancestors of modern dolphins, porpoises, sperm whales, and orcas made this choice. They retained the dentition of their basilosaurid forebears, the conical teeth designed for grasping slippery prey, and they refined it. Some lineages developed dozens of identical teeth, perfect for snagging fish. Others reduced their tooth count dramatically, like the sperm whale with its 18 to 26 lower teeth and vestigial uppers. Still others modified their teeth into tusks, like the narwhal with its single spiraling spear. Keeping teeth was not enough. The ocean is dark. Sound travels through water 5 times faster than through air, and light fades within the first 100 meters of depth. A hunter that relies on vision is a hunter limited to the sunlit surface, excluded from the vast majority of the marine environment where prey might hide. The toothed whales solved this problem with one of evolution's most remarkable innovations. They learned to see with sound. Echolocation works on principles similar to sonar. The animal produces a click, a sharp focused pulse of sound generated in specialized structures near the blowhole. The click travels outward through the water until it strikes an object. The echo returns carrying information about the object's size, shape, distance, and movement. The animal's brain processes this information and constructs a 3-dimensional acoustic image of its surroundings. Modern dolphins can detect a ping-pong ball from over 100 meters away. They can distinguish between objects that differ in thickness by fractions of a millimeter. They can identify fish species by the distinctive echoes of their swim bladders. In murky water, in total darkness, in the crushing depths of the midnight zone, echolocation provides a picture of the world as detailed as anything vision could offer. The evolution of this ability did not happen overnight. The earliest toothed whales, appearing in the fossil record around 34 million years ago, show only the beginnings of echolocation anatomy, the specialized air sacs, the melon organ that focuses outgoing clicks, the fat-filled lower jaw that conducts returning echoes to the ear. These structures developed gradually, refined over millions of years, each improvement offering a slight advantage in the competition for prey. By the time modern Odontocetes emerged, echolocation had become their defining characteristic. The sperm whale, diving to depths of 3,000 meters in pursuit of giant squid, navigates and hunts in absolute darkness. The Amazon River dolphin, swimming through flooded forests where visibility drops to centimeters, finds fish by sound alone. The orca, coordinating pack hunts across kilometers of ocean, communicates tactical information through a vocabulary of clicks and calls. The toothed whales became the hunters of the deep. Their domain extended from the sunlit surface to the abyssal plain, from tropical reefs to polar ice, from open ocean to river systems that penetrate deep into continents. They filled niches that no other marine mammal could reach, exploiting food sources that no other predator could find. 65 million years after a land mammal took its first tentative steps into the water, its descendants were hunting by sonar in the darkest places on Earth. The baleen whales made a different choice. Somewhere in the early Oligocene, a lineage of whales began to lose its teeth. Not through decay or disease, but through evolution, the gradual replacement of enamel and dentin with something stranger, something unprecedented in the history of mammals. Baleen. The substance is keratin, the same protein that forms human fingernails and rhinoceros horns. In baleen whales, it grows in plates from the upper jaw, hundreds of overlapping sheets that hang down into the mouth like the bristles of an enormous brush. The inner edges of these plates are frayed into fine filaments, creating a sieve capable of filtering enormous volumes of water. The feeding strategy this enables is radically different from anything toothed whales do. A humpback whale does not chase individual fish. It opens its mouth and engulfs an entire school, along with thousands of gallons of seawater. Then it closes its mouth and pushes the water out through the baleen, trapping everything larger than the gaps between the filaments. The tongue sweeps the trapped prey backward into the throat. The whale swallows and begins again. This is filter feeding, and it allows baleen whales to exploit food sources that would be impossible to hunt individually. Krill, tiny shrimp-like crustaceans that swarm in astronomical numbers in cold, productive waters, form the primary diet of most baleen whales. A single blue whale can consume 4 tons of krill per day. millions of individual organisms passing through its baleen with every mouthful. The efficiency is staggering. A hunting predator expends energy chasing prey, risks injury in every attack, must succeed often enough to offset the caloric cost of pursuit. A filter feeder simply opens its mouth and lets the ocean provide. When prey is abundant and in the upwelling zones where cold, nutrient-rich water rises to the surface, krill can be unimaginably abundant. Filter feeding yields returns that hunting cannot match. This efficiency enabled size. A blue whale can grow to 30 meters and 200 tons because it has access to a food supply dense enough to fuel such a body. No hunter could catch enough individual prey items to sustain that mass. The baleen system removes the ceiling on size, allowing whales to grow until other constraints, the physics of blood circulation, the mechanics of birth, the simple logistics of moving such an enormous body, begin to impose limits. The largest animals in Earth's history are not hunters. They are grazers of the sea, drifting through clouds of tiny crustaceans, harvesting the ocean's productivity with an elegance that belies their bulk. The split between toothed and baleen whales happened once. Every dolphin, every porpoise, every sperm whale and orca and pilot whale descends from one lineage. Every blue whale, every humpback, every right whale and minke and grey whale descends from another. The common ancestor of both groups lived sometime around 39 million years ago, before the Eocene-Oligocene extinction, before the world cooled and the old order of whales collapsed. We do not know exactly what that ancestor looked like. The fossil record of the earliest odontocetes and mysticetes is fragmentary, and the transition from toothed ancestor to baleen-bearing descendant involved changes to soft tissue that rarely preserves. What we have are snapshots, species that show intermediate stages, half-formed baleen systems, teeth and baleen present simultaneously, enough to confirm that the transition happened gradually, not in a single leap. The oldest known mysticete fossils come from the Southern Ocean, from sediments laid down around 34 million years ago near what is now New Zealand and Antarctica. These early baleen whales were small by modern standards, only a few meters long, with teeth still present alongside the developing baleen plates. They were experiments, first drafts, the rough sketches from which the great filter feeders would eventually emerge. The toothed whales appear at roughly the same time, in deposits scattered across the globe. Small, dolphin-like animals with asymmetrical skulls, a telltale sign of echolocation, which requires specialized structures on one side of the head. Hunting fish in coastal waters, beginning the radiation that would eventually produce the most diverse group of cetaceans on the planet. 34 million years of parallel evolution followed. The toothed whales diversified into more than 70 species, ranging from the tiny vaquita porpoise to the 18-meter sperm whale. The baleen whales diversified into 14 species, ranging from the 6-meter pygmy right whale to the 30-meter blue whale. Both groups colonized every ocean, adapted to every temperature regime, found ways to thrive in environments their ancestors could never have imagined. The divide was not absolute. Both groups remained air-breathing mammals. Both retained the fundamental cetacean body plan, flippers derived from front legs, flukes derived from tail, blowhole derived from nostrils that had migrated to the top of the skull. Both carried vestigial pelvic bones buried in their flesh, remnants of the hind limbs their walking ancestors had used 40 million years earlier. The inheritance was shared, the strategies diverged. The ocean today holds both lineages in abundance. Pods of dolphins surf the bow waves of ships. Sperm whales dive to depths that would crush a submarine. Blue whales migrate between polar feeding grounds and tropical breeding waters, singing songs that carry for hundreds of kilometers through the deep sound channel. Orcas hunt in coordinated packs, communicating through dialects that vary from population to population, teaching their young techniques that have been passed down for generations. The diversity is real, but it masks a precarious truth. Many whale species hover near extinction, their populations reduced to fractions of historical levels by centuries of hunting. The North Atlantic right whale numbers fewer than 400 individuals. The vaquita, smallest of the porpoises, may already be functionally extinct. Even the great whales that have recovered from commercial whaling face new threats. Ship strikes, entanglement in fishing gear, the slow accumulation of plastic and noise in an ocean increasingly dominated by human activity. The story of whale evolution is also a story of survival against odds. The lineage has endured mass extinctions, climate shifts, the rise and fall of entire ecosystems. It has transformed from land to sea, from walking to swimming, from teeth to baleen. It has produced the largest animals ever to exist and some of the most intelligent. Whether it will survive the next century depends on choices being made now, in boardrooms and legislatures and fishing boats, by a species that shares more genetic heritage with whales than either would have guessed. The involucrum that Thuvison found in Indochus, the bone that proved cetacean ancestry, humans have a version of it too, differently shaped but homologous, inherited from the same distant mammalian ancestor. We are cousins, separated by 50 million years of divergent evolution. The whales went to the sea, we stayed on land. Now the land species holds the sea species' fate in its hands. The Great Divide continues in ways the first toothed whale and the first baleen whale could never have anticipated. And the strange part is this: the divide isn't only a modern story, it's written into stone. Long before ships, before sonar, before plastic and oil slicks and noise that never stops, whales were already splitting into different futures, different ways of feeding, different ways of hearing the world, different ways of surviving. One lineage refined teeth into weapons and instruments. Another would abandon teeth entirely and turn its mouth into a living sieve. We tend to imagine evolution as a clean staircase, but the fossil record is messier. It's full of awkward experiments, animals that look almost assembled from spare parts, carrying features that don't belong together unless you remember that nature prototypes in public. Sometimes, the only thing separating a missing chapter from a complete story is a person walking a beach, looking down, and noticing that a rock is shaped wrong. Ross Dullard was not looking for a new species. The school principal from Victoria, Australia, had been fossil hunting on Jan Juk Beach for most of his adult life, walking the same stretch of coastline where the Southern Ocean meets ancient limestone cliffs, scanning the rocks for anything unusual. The beach had produced remarkable finds before: early whale fossils, ancient penguins, the remains of creatures that swam these waters when Australia was still drifting northward from Antarctica. Dullard knew the terrain. He knew what to look for. In 2019, he found something he did not recognize. A dark shape protruded from the cliff face, partially exposed by the endless erosion that reveals new fossils every year. Dullard could see teeth, sharp, prominent teeth, unlike anything he had encountered in 2 decades of amateur collecting. He could see the curve of a skull, the hollow where an eye had once been. Whatever this was, it was significant. He contacted Museums Victoria. Paleontologists arrived to examine the find. The extraction took months, the fossil embedded in rock hard enough to resist casual removal. When the specimen finally emerged, cleaned and prepared for study, even the experts were startled. The skull belonged to a whale. The teeth said otherwise. Baleen whales do not have teeth. This is their defining characteristic, the evolutionary innovation that separates them from their toothed cousins. Modern mysticetes are born with tooth buds that are reabsorbed before birth, vestigial remnants of an ancestry they have long since abandoned. An adult baleen whale has baleen plates and nothing else. The creature from Jan Juk Beach had teeth like steak knives, triangular, serrated, designed for cutting flesh. It had eyes the size of tennis balls, bulging and forward-facing, built for tracking prey rather than filtering plankton. It had a skull structure that placed it firmly within the mystics eat lineage, the baleen whales, yet nothing about its anatomy suggested filter feeding. This was a predator, a hunter, a baleen whale that had never developed baleen. In August 2025, the research team led by Eric Fitzgerald published their analysis in the Zoological Journal of the Linnean Society. They named the creature Janjucetus doulardi, honoring both the beach where it was found and the amateur collector who had spotted it protruding from the cliff. Fitzgerald, senior curator of vertebrate paleontology at Museums Victoria, described the animal with a phrase that captured both its appearance and its improbability. It looked, he said, like a mashup of a seal and a Pokemon. The description was apt. Janjucetus was small by whale standards, perhaps 3 meters long when fully grown, closer in size to a large seal than to its enormous modern relatives. The eyes were disproportionately huge, giving the skull a cartoonish, almost endearing appearance. The jaws were lined with teeth that seemed borrowed from a shark. The overall effect was something that belonged in a fever dream rather than the fossil record. Yet Janjucetus was real, and its existence rewrote part of the story of whale evolution. The Mysticetes, the baleen whales, were supposed to be gentle giants. Every living species is a filter feeder, straining tiny organisms from the water through plates of keratin. The blue whale, the largest animal ever to exist, sustains its enormous body on krill and small fish. The right whale grazes on copepods. The grey whale sucks invertebrates from the seafloor. The humpback gulps schooling fish in bobblenet traps of its own creation. The evolutionary narrative seemed clear. Ancient whales had teeth. Some lineages lost their teeth and developed baleen. Those lineages became the filter feeders we know today. The transition was a one-way journey from predation to filtration, from hunting to grazing, from teeth to baleen. Janjucetus complicated this narrative. Here was an animal that belonged, phylogenetically, to the baleen whale lineage. Its skull showed the anatomical signatures of Mysticete ancestry, bone structures, proportions, features that placed it on the branch of the whale family tree that would eventually produce blue whales and humpbacks. Yet it had not developed baleen. It had not transitioned to filter feeding. It had retained the predatory lifestyle of its more ancient ancestors, hunting fish and possibly other marine mammals in the coastal waters of Oligocene Australia. Janjucetus was not an ancestor of modern baleen whales. It was a cousin, an evolutionary side branch, an experiment that explored what a mysticete could be if it did not commit to the filter-feeding pathway. The mammalodontids, the family to which Janjucetus belongs, represent a road not taken, a group of toothed mysticetes that thrived for millions of years before ultimately leaving no descendants. 4 species of mammalodontids have now been identified, all from the fossil-rich coastline of Victoria. Janjucetus doulardi is the 4th, the newest, the one with the tennis ball eyes and the nightmare teeth. Each discovery adds texture to our understanding of early mysticete diversity, revealing that the baleen whale lineage experimented with predation long after it had split from the toothed whales. The evolutionary tree is not a ladder, it is a bush with branches extending in every direction, most of them leading to dead ends. Janjucetus represents one of those dead ends, a successful strategy for millions of years, ultimately superseded by the filter-feeding lineages that would grow to dominate the modern ocean. Fitzgerald's description of Janjucetus as deceptively cute carries a warning embedded in the adjective. Cute, yes, with those enormous eyes and compact body. Deceptive, absolutely. The teeth of Wadi were weapons. The serrated edges would have sliced through flesh with minimal effort, the triangular shape designed for cutting rather than holding. Modern great white sharks have similar teeth, optimized for taking chunks out of prey too large to swallow whole. Wadi, despite its relatively small size, was equipped to kill animals its own size or larger. The eyes suggest a visual hunter, an animal that relied on sight rather than echolocation to locate prey. Unlike the toothed whales, which were developing their acoustic navigation systems during the same period, Wadi and its mammalodontid relatives showed no signs of echolocation anatomy. They hunted the old-fashioned way, watching for movement, tracking targets through clear coastal waters, striking when opportunity presented. The lifestyle would have been something like a modern leopard seal, an ambush predator lurking in kelp forests or rocky outcrops, exploding into motion when prey ventured too close. Fish, certainly. Smaller marine mammals, possibly. Anything that fit in those tooth-lined jaws and could not escape fast enough. Jan Juc Beach, where the fossil was found, would have looked different 25 million years ago. Australia was further south, the climate cooler, the coastline shaped by geological forces that have since rearranged the continental margins. The shallow seas teemed with life, not the tropical abundance of the Tethys, but a temperate productivity driven by nutrient upwelling and seasonal cycles. Wadi patrolled these waters, one predator among many, filling a niche that would eventually be occupied by other lineages. When the mammalodontids disappeared, the ecological role of small mystichete predator disappeared with them. Modern baleen whales are all filter feeders, all committed to the strategy that Wadi never adopted. The evolutionary contingency is striking. If the filter-feeding lineages had failed, if some catastrophe had eliminated the early baleen-bearing mystichetes, perhaps the mammalodontids would have diversified instead. Perhaps the modern ocean would be filled with toothed mystichetes, tennis ball-eyed predators hunting in pods, the gentle giants of our world replaced by something with considerably more teeth. Evolution does not guarantee outcomes, it explores possibilities. Wadi was one possibility, viable for millions of years, ultimately replaced by a different solution to the problem of being a whale. Dullard, the amateur fossil hunter whose name now graces a scientific species, celebrated the announcement with what he called a fossil party. Cetacean-themed games, whale-shaped treats, the kind of gathering that acknowledges both the seriousness of paleontological discovery and the pure joy of finding something wonderful in the rocks. His family, he admitted, was mostly relieved. They had been hearing about the mysterious fossil for 6 years through extraction and preparation and analysis and peer review. The discovery had consumed his attention in the way that passionate hobbies do, crowding out other topics of conversation, demanding patience from everyone around him. Now the waiting was over. Janjucetus Dulardi was official, published, named, entered into the permanent record of life on Earth. A school principal from Victoria had contributed to the scientific understanding of whale evolution, joining the long tradition of amateur collectors whose careful observations have filled museums around the world. The partnership between amateurs and professionals is essential to paleontology. Fossils do not announce themselves. They erode out of cliffs and wash onto beaches and lie in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice them. Professional paleontologists cannot be everywhere, cannot walk every coastline, cannot scan every exposed rock face. Amateur collectors extend the reach of science, multiplying the eyes searching for significant finds. Dullard's discovery matters because it was made at all. The fossil could have eroded away, tumbled into the surf, been ground to fragments by the same forces that had exposed it. Instead, someone was paying attention. Someone knew what to look for. Someone made the call that brought the experts in. The coastline at Jan Juk continues to erode. More fossils will emerge. More chapters of the whale story will be written in bones and teeth and the patient work of extraction. Fitzgerald, who has spent his career studying the ancient whales of Australia, expects more surprises. The fossil record is incomplete by definition. We have found only what has been preserved and exposed and discovered, a tiny fraction of the animals that once lived. Every new find has the potential to revise the narrative. Rodhocetus revised it by revealing that early Maiacetus were more diverse, more experimental, more willing to try different strategies than the modern survivors suggest. The gentle giants were not always gentle. The filter feeders were not always filter feeders. The baleen whales, it turns out, had a predatory streak that they eventually abandoned. The ocean tested many approaches. Rodhocetus was one approach. The blue whale was another. The ocean chose the blue whale. But it took millions of years to decide. What we call baleen whales sounds like a single idea, as if evolution woke up one morning and said, let's build a living net. But that isn't how it happens. First comes the messy in-between, the era where a whale can look like a contradiction, part hunter, part grazer, part relic of teeth, part hint of what will replace them. The sea doesn't reward elegance. It rewards whatever works right now, in this water, with these currents, in this climate, with these prey. So the question becomes simple and oddly intimate. When did the mouth change its job? Not as a metaphor, as anatomy, as hardware, as a new way of eating that would make it possible to become truly enormous, not by becoming a better predator, but by becoming a better vacuum cleaner of the living ocean. And the shift didn't begin with the whole body. It began with the jawline, with gums, with a material you already carry on your own hands. The transition happened in the mouth. Somewhere between 30 and 25 million years ago, a lineage of whales began growing something unprecedented from their upper jaws. Not teeth, they were already losing those, the enamel thinning, the roots shrinking, generation by generation. Something else. Plates of keratin, the same protein that forms fingernails and hair, sprouting from the gums in rows, each plate fringed with fine bristles along its inner edge. Baleen. No other mammal has ever evolved anything like it. The structure is unique to Maiacetus, an innovation so successful that it enabled the largest animals in Earth's history, yet so improbable that no other lineage has stumbled upon the same solution. Baleen is a one-time invention, a stroke of evolutionary luck that transformed a group of moderately successful marine predators into the dominant giants of the modern ocean. The earliest baleen whales still had teeth. Fossils from the Oligocene show animals with both structures present simultaneously, teeth in the front of the jaw, rudimentary baleen plates further back. These transitional forms were hedging their bets, maintaining the predatory equipment of their ancestors while experimenting with a new feeding strategy. The teeth would have been useful for catching individual prey. The baleen would have allowed supplementary filter feeding, straining small organisms from the water during times when larger prey was scarce. The dual system did not last. Within a few million years, the teeth disappeared entirely in most lineages, reabsorbed before birth, leaving only the baleen. The commitment was total. Once a lineage gave up its teeth, there was no going back. The developmental pathways that produce enamel and dentin were shut down, the genes silenced, the option foreclosed. Modern baleen whales are born toothless and die toothless, their jaws shaped entirely around the filter feeding apparatus. The loss seems like a sacrifice. Teeth are weapons, tools, the evolutionary inheritance of 400 million years of vertebrate predation. Giving them up meant giving up the ability to catch and process individual prey, surrendering to a diet of whatever was small enough to be strained from the water. The gain was everything else. Filter feeding unlocked a food source that predation could never access efficiently. The ocean is filled with tiny organisms, copepods, krill, larval fish, the drifting clouds of plankton that form the base of the marine food web. These organisms exist in densities that stagger comprehension. A single swarm of Antarctic krill can contain millions of tons of biomass, enough to sustain entire ecosystems, enough to fuel the metabolism of the largest animals ever to exist. A predator cannot eat krill one at a time. The energy spent catching each individual crustacean would exceed the energy gained from consuming it. The math does not work. The food is there, unimaginably abundant, but inaccessible to any animal that must hunt its meals piece by piece. Baleen changed the math. A blue whale feeds by lunging. It accelerates toward a dense patch of krill, opens its mouth to an angle of nearly 90 degrees, and engulfs everything in its path: water, krill, small fish, whatever happens to be there. The throat expands like a balloon, pleated grooves stretching to accommodate a volume that can exceed the whale's own body. Then the mouth closes. The tongue, a massive muscular organ weighing as much as an elephant, pushes forward, forcing the water out through the baleen plates. The krill remain trapped, packed against the bristled inner surface of the baleen, and the tongue sweeps them backward into the throat. The entire sequence takes about 10 seconds. In those 10 seconds, a blue whale can capture 500,000 calories worth of krill. No predator on Earth can match that efficiency. No hunter, no matter how skilled, can extract so much energy from the environment so quickly. The efficiency enabled size. A blue whale needs roughly 1.5 million calories per day to sustain its metabolism. An amount that sounds impossible until you realize that each feeding lunge can provide a third of that requirement. 3 good lunges per hour, a few hours of feeding per day, and the largest animal in history has met its caloric needs. The size, in turn, enabled more efficient feeding. A larger mouth engulfs more water. Larger baleen plates strain more efficiently. A larger body stores more energy, allowing the whale to travel further between productive feeding grounds. The feedback loop drove mystichetes toward gigantism, each generation slightly larger than the last, the upper limit determined not by food availability, but by the physics of circulation, respiration, and reproduction. Blue whales reached that limit. At 30 meters and 200 tons, they press against constraints that have nothing to do with diet. The heart, already the size of a small car, cannot grow much larger without requiring impossible amounts of energy to pump blood. The lungs, already capable of exchanging thousands of liters of air with each breath, cannot scale further without redesigning the entire respiratory system. The birth canal, already stretched to accommodate calves that weigh 3 tons, cannot expand further without compromising the mother's structural integrity. The blue whale is not the largest animal that could theoretically exist. It is the largest animal that can exist given the mammalian body plan, air-breathing, warm-blooded, giving birth to live young that must be nursed to independence. Evolution pushed the design to its limits and stopped there, not because food ran out, but because the engineering could go no further. The journey from Janjucetus to blue whale spans roughly 25 million years. In that time, the mystichete lineage transformed from small, toothed predators into the largest animals the planet has ever produced. The transformation involved every system in the body, not just the mouth and feeding apparatus, but the skeleton, the muscles, the circulatory system, the reproductive biology, the behavior. The skeleton lightened. Early whales, like Maiacetus and Basilosaurus, had dense bones that helped them sink. Modern baleen whales have spongy, oil-filled bones that provide buoyancy, helping support their enormous mass against the constant pull of gravity. The shift from dense to porous bones tracks the shift from coastal wading to open ocean cruising, from bottom-dwelling to pelagic existence. The tail transformed. The small, flexible tails of early whales gave way to the massive flukes of modern cetaceans, horizontal paddles of pure muscle and connective tissue, capable of generating enough thrust to propel a 100-ton animal through the water at speeds exceeding 30 kilometers per hour. The up and down motion of the flukes, so different from the side-to-side motion of fish tails, betrays the whale's mammalian heritage. The spine flexes vertically because the ancestors ran on land, and running mammals flex their spines vertically. The brain expanded. Early whales had small brains relative to their body size, comparable to other mammals of the Eocene. Modern baleen whales have large, complex brains, capable of sophisticated communication, long-term memory, and behaviors that suggest something approaching culture. Humpback whales compose songs that evolve over time, spreading from population to population across ocean basins. Grey whales remember migration routes that span 20,000 kilometers, passing the knowledge from mother to calf across generations. Blue whales produce sounds that travel for hundreds of kilometers through the deep sound channel, maintaining contact across distances that would seem to preclude any form of communication. The intelligence is real, though different from our own. A whale's brain is organized differently, optimized for different sensory inputs and different cognitive tasks. What a whale thinks, what a whale knows, what a whale experiences as it cruises through the deep ocean with a brain larger than any land animal's. These questions remain largely unanswered, limited by our inability to access a consciousness so different from our own. What we can measure is behavior, and behavior suggests that baleen whales are not simple feeding machines, not biological vacuum cleaners mindlessly straining krill from the water. They are social, communicative, capable of learning and teaching, embedded in relationships that persist across decades. The blue whale, for all its size, is not alone. It exists within a network of other blue whales, connected by sound across the vastness of the ocean, part of a population that once numbered in the hundreds of thousands. The population does not number in the hundreds of thousands anymore. Commercial whaling, which began in earnest in the 19th century and peaked in the mid-20th, reduced blue whale populations by more than 99%. From an estimated 300,000 individuals before industrialized hunting, the species declined to perhaps 5,000 by the time international protections were enacted in 1966. The largest animal ever to exist was nearly erased by a single predator species that had learned to cross oceans and kill from a distance. The recovery has been slow. Blue whales reproduce slowly, reaching sexual maturity around 10 years of age, giving birth to single calves after 12-month pregnancies, nursing those calves for 7 months before weaning. A population reduced to 5,000 individuals cannot bounce back quickly. Every female is precious. Every successful birth matters. Current estimates suggest global blue whale populations have recovered to perhaps 10,000 to 25,000 individuals. The uncertainty reflects the difficulty of counting animals that spend most of their lives underwater, surfacing only to breathe, distributed across millions of square kilometers of ocean. The recovery is real but incomplete. The species remains endangered. The math of reproduction, which once enabled the largest animals in history, now constrains how quickly those animals can return from the brink. Other baleen whales face similar challenges. The North Atlantic right whale, hunted nearly to extinction for its oil and baleen, numbers fewer than 400 individuals. A population so small that the death of a single reproductive female measurably affects the species' survival prospects. The vaquita, a small porpoise rather than a baleen whale, hovers at perhaps 10 individuals, functionally extinct even if a few still swim. The SAI whale, the fin whale, the grey whale, all reduced all recovering at the glacial pace that whale biology permits. The filter feeding strategy that enabled such spectacular success also created vulnerability. An animal that requires millions of calories per day cannot survive in an ocean where productivity has collapsed. An animal that reproduces so slowly cannot recover quickly from population crashes. An animal that migrates thousands of kilometers depends on conditions remaining favorable across the entire route. Climate change is altering those conditions. Warming oceans are shifting the distribution of krill, moving the densest aggregations away from traditional feeding grounds. Acidification threatens the tiny organisms at the base of the food web, the copepods and pteropods that support the entire marine ecosystem. Noise pollution from shipping interferes with the acoustic communication that whales depend on for finding mates and maintaining social bonds. The blue whale evolved for a world that no longer quite exists. The filter feeding strategy that made it the largest animal in history assumed an ocean that would remain productive, stable, and quiet. None of those assumptions hold anymore. The story of baleen whales is not finished. The species that survive the current bottleneck will continue evolving, adapting to whatever conditions the future ocean provides. Perhaps they will grow smaller, trading size for reproductive speed. Perhaps they will shift their diets, learning to exploit new food sources as old ones disappear. Perhaps they will develop new behaviors, new migration routes, new strategies for surviving in a world increasingly dominated by human activity. Evolution does not stop. It cannot stop. Every generation is a new experiment. Every birth a roll of the dice, every death a verdict on whether a particular combination of genes was suited to the environment it encountered. The whales will keep evolving, with or without our permission, toward forms we cannot predict. The question is whether we will give them time. 50 million years to transform from a terrified deer hiding in a stream to the largest animal ever to exist. 15 million years to go from walking on 4 legs to swimming with flukes. 25 million years to evolve from toothed predators to filter-feeding giants. 1 century to reduce those giants to endangered remnants. The timescales do not match. Evolution works in millions of years. Human impact works in decades. The whales cannot adapt fast enough to keep pace with changes we are imposing on their world. If they are to survive, it will be because we chose to let them, because we decided that a world with blue whales is worth preserving, that the 50 million year journey that produced these animals deserves a future as well as a past. The filter worked, the giants arose. What happens next is up to us. And that's the strange part. We talk about whales as if they are finished products, icons, monuments, living symbols. But evolution doesn't build monuments. It builds compromises that happen to survive. Even the blue whale, this impossible cathedral of flesh, still carries the earlier drafts inside it. Not as stories, as literal parts, as hardware left behind. Like scaffolding still hidden inside the final building, quietly proving that the building was never designed in one clean step. To understand how complete this transformation really was, you don't start with the ocean. You start with what the ocean never fully erased. Because beneath the smooth torpedo skin, there are still echoes of a shoreline. Every whale carries a secret skeleton. Deep within the body, buried beneath tons of muscle and blubber, invisible from the outside, modern cetaceans retain the bones of legs they no longer use. A pelvis disconnected from the spine, floating in tissue. Sometimes a femur, sometimes even fragments of tibia and fibula, the remnants of limbs that last touched ground more than 40 million years ago. These bones serve no locomotive function. They do not help the whale swim. They do not support weight or provide leverage or contribute to propulsion. In strictly mechanical terms, they are useless. metabolic overhead, a cost with no benefit, the kind of structure that natural selection should have eliminated long ago. Yet there they remain. Generation after generation, whale after whale, the ghost legs persist. They are smaller now than they were in Basilosaurus, reduced to nubbins in most modern species, but they have not disappeared entirely. Something keeps them, maintains them, passes them from parent to offspring across millions of years. The persistence is a message. The vestigial pelvis is a letter from the past, written in bone, delivered to every whale that has ever lived. It says, "Your ancestors walked." It says, "You came from somewhere else." It says, "Evolution is not a designer working with a blank slate, but a tinkerer modifying what already exists, leaving traces of history in every body it shapes." The bones of whale legs are among the most powerful pieces of evidence for evolution ever discovered, not because they prove anything that other evidence does not prove. The fossil record, the genetic data, the comparative anatomy all tell the same story, but because they are so viscerally surprising. A whale with legs, a creature perfectly adapted to the ocean, carrying the remnants of a terrestrial existence it abandoned 40 million years ago. The image lodges in the mind and stays there. Creationists have struggled with whale leg bones since they were first discovered. The structures seem designed to refute the idea of perfect, purposeful creation. Why would a designer give whales a pelvis? Why include femurs that connect to nothing, serve nothing, do nothing? The only answer that makes sense is history. The whales have a pelvis because their ancestors had a pelvis, and evolution, unlike a designer, cannot start from scratch. The bones persist for several possible reasons. They may be maintained by genetic linkages connected to developmental pathways that control other, still functional structures. They may serve minor secondary functions. Some researchers have suggested that the pelvic bones in male cetaceans may help anchor muscles used during reproduction, or they may simply be too small to matter, not costly enough for natural selection to bother eliminating, drifting through the generations as neutral passengers in an otherwise streamlined body. Whatever the reason, they remain, and in remaining, they testify. The pelvis is not the only ghost. Look at a whale's flipper. From the outside, it appears to be a simple paddle, smooth, streamlined, shaped for pushing water. X-ray the flipper, and a different picture emerges. Inside that smooth external form are bones, finger bones. 5 of them in most species, arranged in the same pattern you would find in a human hand. Humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. The same bones in the same arrangement, modified beyond recognition, but still fundamentally present. A whale's flipper is a hand, stretched and flattened, the fingers elongated and webbed with tissue, the whole structure encased in a smooth hydrodynamic skin. The homology is unmistakable. Place a whale flipper skeleton next to a human arm skeleton, next to a bat wing skeleton, next to a dogleg skeleton, and the correspondence leaps out. The same bones, the same joints, the same fundamental architecture, modified for swimming, grasping, flying, running. 400 million years of vertebrate evolution, and the basic limb plan has never been redesigned, only modified, only adjusted, only tinkered with. This is what evolutionary biology calls deep homology, the preservation of fundamental structures across vast spans of time and dramatic changes in function. The whale's flipper did not evolve from scratch. It evolved from the leg of Maiacetus, which evolved from the leg of earlier artiodactyls, which evolved from the leg of the first tetrapods that crawled out of the water in the Devonian period. The bones have been passed down, generation to generation, for nearly 400 million years. They have been shortened and lengthened, fused and separated, reduced and elaborated. They have never been replaced. The fingers inside a whale's flipper cannot grasp. They cannot manipulate. They cannot do anything that fingers are supposed to do. They are structural elements, internal supports for the paddle-shaped flipper, as functionless in their original capacity as the vestigial pelvis. Yet they remain fingers, anatomically speaking. The bones are there, the joints are there. The developmental program that builds a hand in every mammalian embryo builds a hand in whale embryos too, and then modifies it into something that looks nothing like a hand. The modification is remarkable. The preservation is more remarkable still. Occasionally, the ghosts become visible. In 1919, a whaling ship in the North Pacific killed a humpback whale with something protruding from its body wall. The whalers, accustomed to processing hundreds of whales, noticed immediately that this one was different. Where there should have been smooth skin and blubber, there was a limb, a small, malformed limb, complete with what appeared to be rudimentary bones projecting from the whale's flank in roughly the position where a hind leg would be expected. The specimen was preserved and studied. The limb contained a femur, a tibia, and what might have been metatarsals, the bones of a foot. The structure was not functional. The whale had lived its entire life with this atavistic appendage, swimming and feeding and migrating despite carrying visible evidence of its terrestrial ancestry. Atavisms like this are rare but not unique. Dolphins have been found with hind limb buds, small protrusions containing cartilage or bone. Whales have been documented with external leg-like structures, varying in development from slight bumps to recognizable limbs. Each case represents a developmental accident, a moment when the genetic program that suppresses hind limb growth failed to execute completely. The genes for building legs are still present in whale DNA. They have not been deleted. They have been silenced, switched off by regulatory sequences that prevent them from being expressed during development. When those regulatory sequences fail, when the silencing mechanism breaks down, the ancient program activates and begins building structures that have not been needed for 40 million years. The leg genes remember. The whale's body, given the right developmental accident, can still produce something like a leg. The instructions are archived, dormant, waiting for a signal that almost never comes. This is one of the most striking demonstrations of evolutionary history available to science. The genes for a structure that has been functionless for 40 million years remain present and potentially active in the genome. Evolution did not remove them. Evolution simply turned them off. The difference matters. A gene that has been deleted cannot be reactivated, but a gene that has been silenced can, under the right circumstances, express itself again. The atavistic whale limbs are not throwbacks in any mystical sense. They are not ancestral memories or evolutionary reversals. They are developmental accidents, moments when the complex machinery of gene regulation failed to work perfectly. Yet in failing, they reveal something true about the whale's history. The legs are still in there, encoded in DNA, waiting. The internal anatomy of whales contains other echoes. The diaphragm, the muscular sheet that separates the chest cavity from the abdomen in all mammals, persists in whales. It functions differently. Cetaceans use different mechanisms for breathing than terrestrial mammals. But the structure remains, a remnant of the air-breathing land animals from which whales descended. The hair follicles persist too. Modern whales are nearly hairless, their bodies streamlined for swimming, their skin smooth and rubbery. Yet they are not entirely hairless. Most cetaceans retain a few sensory hairs on the head, particularly around the snout and chin, remnants of the furry coat their ancestors wore. Newborn whales sometimes have more hair than adults, the follicles active briefly before being suppressed as the animal matures. The lungs breathe air. This seems obvious. Of course, whales breathe air, everyone knows that, but it is worth pausing to consider how strange it is. Whales have been aquatic for 40 million years. They have modified every other system for life in the water, yet they still breathe air, still must surface regularly, still drown if held underwater too long. The respiratory system, unlike the locomotor system, was never redesigned. The constraint was too fundamental. Mammalian metabolism requires oxygen concentrations that gills cannot provide. The whales were stuck with lungs, and so they remained tied to the surface, committed to a life of endless commuting between the air above and the water below. The constraint shapes everything about whale existence. Dive times are limited by oxygen stores. Migration routes must account for surfacing needs. Sleep must be managed differently than in terrestrial mammals. Cetaceans sleep with half their brain at a time, keeping enough consciousness active to remember to breathe. The air-breathing requirement is a chain linking modern whales to their terrestrial ancestors, unbreakable despite 40 million years of aquatic evolution. Every breath a whale takes is an echo of the land. The echoes grow quieter with time. The vestigial structures in modern whales are smaller, less developed, further removed from functionality than they were in Basilosaurus or Dorudon. The pelvis has shrunk. The femur, when present, is barely recognizable. The genes for hind limb development are more thoroughly silenced, atavisms rarer than they once were. Evolution is slowly erasing the traces. Given enough time, millions more years, tens of millions, the last vestiges might disappear entirely. The pelvis might finally be reduced to nothing. The silenced genes might accumulate enough mutations to become permanently non-functional. The whales of the far future might carry no evidence of their terrestrial past at all. Or perhaps not. Perhaps some structures will persist indefinitely, maintained by genetic linkages too complex to disentangle, too deeply embedded in developmental programs to be removed without disrupting something essential. The history might be permanent, written into whale bodies for as long as whales exist. We cannot know. We can only observe the present moment in a process that has been unfolding for 50 million years and will continue long after we are gone. The whales alive today carry their ancestors within them, reduced to bone fragments and silenced genes, echoes of a world they have never seen. The land is still there, in every whale, hidden, diminished, but present. They left it behind. They never entirely escaped it. And for a long time, that would have been the end of the story. Bone is persuasive. Fossils feel like the final evidence, heavy, literal, carved into rock. If you can hold a pelvis in your hands, if you can point to a tiny femur buried in muscle, it feels like you're reading the past directly. But bones can only tell you what happened to bodies. They can't tell you what happened to relationships. They can't tell you who is truly related to whom, because evolution is not a lineup of who looks most similar. It's a family tree with missing branches, convergent tricks, and lookalikes that are not cousins at all. Sometimes the shape lies, sometimes the teeth lie, sometimes the most reasonable ancestor is just the one your brain likes because it makes a neat story. Then, late in the 20th century, biology learned a new language, one that doesn't fossilize, one that hides in every living cell. A language that remembers ancestry even when anatomy has been rewritten. And when scientists finally listened to that language, the answer it gave was embarrassing. Not a wolf-like predator with hooves, not a sleek coastal hunter. A hippo. The hippopotamus was an insult. For most of the 20th century, paleontologists believed they had whale ancestry figured out. The fossil evidence pointed to mesonychids, wolf-like carnivores with hooves instead of claws that had prowled the coastlines of ancient Asia. The teeth matched. The skull features aligned. The mesonychids were predators, which explained how whales had become predators. The narrative was clean, logical, satisfying. Then the geneticists arrived and everything fell apart. In the 1990s, molecular biologists began comparing DNA sequences across mammalian groups, building family trees based not on bones, but on the code of life itself. The technique was new, the data revolutionary, and the results for whale evolution were embarrassing. The DNA did not support a mesonychid origin. The DNA pointed somewhere else entirely. Whales, according to the genetic evidence, were most closely related to hippopotamuses. The paleontologists objected. Hippos were herbivores, not carnivores. Hippos lived in Africa, not Asia. Hippos appeared in the fossil record tens of millions of years after the first whales. The molecular data must be wrong, contaminated, misinterpreted. Whales could not be related to hippos. The idea was absurd. The idea was correct. As more genetic data accumulated, the relationship became undeniable. Whales and hippos share molecular signatures found in no other mammalian group. Their DNA tells a consistent story. Sometime around 54 million years ago, a common ancestor gave rise to two lineages. One lineage would eventually produce the hippopotamuses. The other would produce the whales. The fossil record, once the stumbling block, eventually confirmed what the genes had revealed. The ankle bones of early whales, Maiacetus, Rodhocetus, and their kin, showed a distinctive double pulley shape found only in artiodactyls, the even-toed ungulates that include pigs, deer, cattle, and hippos. The mesonychids had been a red herring. The real ancestors of whales were not wolf-like carnivores, but something closer to the ancestors of modern livestock. The discovery of Rodhocetus sealed the case. Here was a small deer-like artiodactyl with the involucrum of a whale, the dense bones of an aquatic wader, and the ankle structure of its even-toed cousins. Rodhocetus was not a direct ancestor. It lived at the same time as early whales, not before them. But it showed what the common ancestor might have looked like. Something small, something herbivorous, something that waded into water not to hunt but to hide. The genetic evidence and the fossil evidence had converged on the same truth. Whales were artiodactyls. Hippos were their closest living relatives. The largest animals in the ocean and the third largest animals on land shared a common ancestor that neither would recognize. The genes remember more than ancestry. Embedded in whale DNA are the remnants of adaptations that no longer serve any function, genetic fossils as telling as the bones buried in their flesh. The code for building legs is still there, silenced but not deleted. The code for producing tooth enamel persists in baleen whales, even though no baleen whale has erupted a tooth in 30 million years. The genetic machinery for detecting airborne odors, useless to an animal that breathes through a blowhole and never sniffs the wind, remains present, mutating slowly into incoherence. These pseudogenes are molecular vestiges, the DNA equivalent of the pelvis bones hidden inside a whale's body. They perform no function. They contribute nothing to survival or reproduction. They persist because evolution is not an editor, does not clean up after itself, does not remove what it no longer uses unless there is active pressure to do so. The olfactory receptor genes are particularly striking. Land mammals have hundreds of genes for detecting airborne chemicals, a vast library of molecular sensors that allow them to smell food, predators, mates, and danger. Whales have many of these same genes, but most of them are broken, riddled with mutations that render them non-functional, stop codons and frame shifts and deletions that have accumulated over millions of years of disuse. The whales cannot smell in the way their ancestors smelled. They have other senses, other ways of perceiving the world. Echolocation for the toothed whales, sensitivity to water pressure and vibration for all cetaceans, acoustic communication that spans ocean basins. The olfactory system was traded away, made redundant by the transition to aquatic life, allowed to decay in the genetic archive where it once resided. The decay is measurable. By comparing the olfactory genes of whales to those of their terrestrial relatives, geneticists can estimate how long ago the genes stopped functioning. The molecular clock ticks forward with each generation, mutations accumulating at a roughly constant rate, providing a timeline of evolutionary change independent of the fossil record. The timelines match. The genetic evidence for when whale ancestors entered the water aligns with the fossil evidence for when early cetaceans appear in the geological record. Two independent lines of inquiry using completely different methods converge on the same answer. The whales went to sea approximately 50 million years ago, and their genes have been accumulating evidence of that transition ever since. The hippopotamus connection illuminates something important about evolutionary relationships. Hippos and whales do not look alike, they do not behave alike, they do not occupy the same ecological niche or face the same environmental pressures. If you knew nothing of genetics, nothing of molecular biology, nothing of the deep structure of DNA, you would never guess that these animals were more closely related to each other than either is to any other living mammal. This is what deep time does. 54 million years of divergent evolution can transform two lineages beyond recognition. The common ancestor of whales and hippos was neither a whale nor a hippo. It was something else entirely, some small artiodactyl wandering the margins of the Tethys Sea, a creature that would fit comfortably in neither the ocean nor the rivers of modern Africa. From that single starting point, evolution carved two radically different trajectories. One lineage stayed in freshwater, grew large, adopted a semi-aquatic lifestyle, spread across Africa. The other lineage went to sea, transformed its body beyond recognition, colonized every ocean on the planet, grew to sizes that dwarf anything else in Earth's history. The relationship is invisible at the level of gross anatomy. The relationship is unmistakable at the level of molecular biology. DNA does not lie, does not care about appearances, simply records the history of descent with modification that connects all living things. The hippo is not embarrassed by its whale cousins. It cannot be. It knows nothing of evolutionary relationships, nothing of molecular phylogeny, nothing of the scientific debates that raged over its place in the mammalian family tree. It simply exists, wallowing in African rivers, living the life its lineage has lived for millions of years, unaware that its closest relatives are hunting squid in the abyssal darkness thousands of meters below the surface of distant oceans. The connection exists whether the animals know it or not. The genes remember what the bodies have forgotten. Modern genomics has revealed the mechanisms of whale transformation in unprecedented detail. Researchers have identified specific genes that changed during the transition from land to sea. Genes for oxygen storage, for diving physiology, for underwater hearing. The myoglobin gene, which codes for the protein that stores oxygen in muscles, shows clear signatures of positive selection in cetacean lineages. Whales have more myoglobin than terrestrial mammals, and their myoglobin has evolved to remain functional at higher concentrations. Adaptations that allow the extended dive times essential to marine life. The genes for bone development show modifications that explain the shift from dense, osteosclerotic bones in early whales to the lighter, spongy bones of modern cetaceans. The genetic switches that control when and where bones grow, how dense they become, how much mineral they deposit, all of these show evidence of evolutionary change. Fine-tuning across millions of years to optimize the skeleton for different modes of aquatic existence. The genes for echolocation present in toothed whales show convergent evolution with the genes for echolocation in bats, two lineages that independently evolved the ability to navigate by sound, using some of the same genetic machinery to do so. The coincidence is not really coincidence. There are only so many ways to modify a mammalian sensory system for acoustic imaging. Evolution found similar solutions because the underlying biological constraints limited the available options. The more we learn about whale genomes, the more detailed the story becomes. Each gene is a sentence, each chromosome a chapter, the complete genome a book that tells the history of the lineage from its earliest origins to the present day. We are only beginning to read this book. The sequencing is complete for several whale species, but the interpretation will take decades, perhaps centuries. Every gene has a story. Every mutation is a data point. The archive is vast beyond comprehension. What we have learned so far confirms and extends what the fossils told us. The whales descended from terrestrial artiodactyls. They entered the water approximately 50 million years ago. They transformed their bodies through a series of modifications, sensory, skeletal, physiological, that accumulated over millions of years. They diverged into toothed and baleen lineages around 34 million years ago. They radiated into dozens of species, filling niches from river dolphin to blue whale. The genes tell the same story as the bones. The convergence is the point. Two completely independent sources of evidence derived from completely different methods, arriving at the same conclusion. This is how science builds confidence. This is how knowledge becomes certain. The genetic connection between whales and hippos raises a haunting question. If 54 million years of evolution can transform a small artiodactyl into a blue whale, what else might be possible? What transformations are occurring now, too slow for human observation, too gradual for any generation to notice? What will the descendants of modern species look like in 50 million years? We cannot answer these questions. We cannot predict evolution. We can only observe its results, trace its history, marvel at the improbability of what has already happened. The hippo and the whale diverged from a common ancestor. One stayed near the water's edge. One went all the way in. The genes remember the moment of divergence, encode the history of separation, carry the evidence of kinship that no amount of physical transformation can erase. 54 million years ago, there was no distinction between the whale lineage and the hippo lineage. They were the same thing. They shared the same genes, the same ancestor, the same potential futures. Every possibility was still open. Then one population went one way and another went another, and 54 million years later, we have hippos wallowing in the Zambezi and blue whales singing in the Pacific, and both of them carry the proof of their connection in every cell of their bodies. The genes remember everything, even the choices that were never consciously made. The question sounds simple. The answer is not. Why would a land animal go back to the sea? Why would a creature that had spent hundreds of millions of years evolving legs, lungs, warm blood, and live birth abandon the environment where all those adaptations made sense? Why trade walking for swimming, breathing freely for holding your breath, the solid ground for the shifting three-dimensional uncertainty of water? The question assumes intention. Evolution has none. No animal decides to become aquatic. No lineage chooses a destination and walks toward it. What happens is simpler, more mechanical, and, in its own way, more profound. Animals survive. Animals reproduce. Whatever helps them do those things gets passed on. Whatever hinders them disappears. The ancestors of whales did not decide to enter the water. They simply found that the water helped them survive. Generation after generation, the individuals that spent more time in water left more offspring than the individuals that stayed on land. The difference was probably slight at first. A few more surviving calves, a marginally longer lifespan, a fractionally better chance of passing on genes. Over thousands of generations, slight differences compound. The lineage drifts toward whatever works. The water worked. The question then becomes, why did the water work? What advantage did an aquatic lifestyle offer to small, hoofed mammals wandering the margins of the Tethys Sea 50 million years ago? Several hypotheses compete for attention. None of them excludes the others. The true answer is probably some combination, different factors mattering at different stages of the transition. The first hypothesis is predator avoidance. Rodhocetus, the small deer-like creature whose ear bones connect it to whale ancestry, had dense leg bones and isotope signatures suggesting a semi-aquatic lifestyle. It was not a predator. It was prey, a small herbivore living in a world full of larger carnivores, competing for survival in forests and riverbanks, where threats lurked in every shadow. Water offers refuge. A predator optimized for land pursuit loses its advantage the moment prey enters a stream or lake. The hunting strategies that work on solid ground, speed, endurance, ambush from cover, fail in an environment where the target can simply submerge and disappear. An animal that can hold its breath and wait underwater has an escape route unavailable to its terrestrial competitors. The modern African water chevrotain demonstrates this strategy in action. When threatened by eagles or leopards, it dives into water and walks along the bottom, invisible from above, holding its breath for minutes at a time. The predator waits, or searches, or gives up. The chevrotain surfaces when the danger has passed and returns to its terrestrial life. The earliest whale ancestors may have begun their aquatic journey this way, not seeking food in the water, not hunting fish, simply hiding. The water was a refuge, a safe zone, a place where the rules that governed life on land did not apply. The more time an animal spent in the water, the more likely it was to survive encounters with predators. Survival meant reproduction. Reproduction meant passing on whatever traits made aquatic hiding more effective. Dense bones helped. They made it easier to sink, easier to stay submerged without fighting buoyancy. An animal with denser bones could hide longer, dive deeper, remain invisible while lighter competitors bobbed helplessly at the surface. The involucrum helped too. Better underwater hearing meant earlier warning of approaching danger, better awareness of the aquatic environment, a sensory advantage that complemented the physical advantages of dense bones. The ear bones that would eventually enable whale echolocation began as tools for survival, not hunting. Fear drove the first whales into the water. Safety kept them there. The second hypothesis is food availability. The margins of the Tethys Sea were extraordinarily productive. Rivers carried nutrients from the land into coastal waters, feeding blooms of plankton that supported complex food webs. Fish congregated in the estuaries and shallows, drawn by the same productivity that would eventually attract the whales. The boundary between land and sea was a buffet, offering food sources unavailable to purely terrestrial animals. An animal that could hunt in both environments had access to resources that specialists could not reach. A creature comfortable wading into the shallows could catch fish that terrestrial predators could not pursue. A creature comfortable returning to land could escape marine predators that could not follow onto shore. The in-between zone offered the best of both worlds, at least until competition from fully aquatic animals eventually pushed the whale lineage further from shore. Maiacetus, the earliest well-documented whale, shows evidence of fish eating in its toothware and isotope chemistry. The transition from herbivore to carnivore happened early, possibly before the lineage was fully committed to water. Fish were abundant. Fish were nutritious. Fish were there for the taking if an animal had the right adaptations to catch them. The shift to carnivory may have accelerated the transition. Herbivores can find food on land. The plants are everywhere, stationary, easy to locate. Carnivores must follow their prey. If the prey lives in water, the predator must enter water to catch it. Each generation that ate more fish spent more time swimming. Each generation that swam more developed better swimming adaptations. The feedback loop pulled the lineage deeper into the aquatic realm. Hunger drove the early whales further from shore. Opportunity pulled them toward the open sea. The third hypothesis is competition avoidance. The Eocene was a crowded time on land. Mammals had been diversifying for 15 million years since the extinction of the dinosaurs, filling ecological niches, competing for resources, evolving into forms that would eventually produce horses, elephants, primates, and carnivores. The easy niches were taken, the obvious opportunities were occupied. The ocean offered empty space. The great marine reptiles of the Mesozoic, ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, had vanished with the dinosaurs. For 15 million years after the asteroid impact, the role of large marine predator went unfilled. Sharks persisted as they always had, but the niches occupied by air-breathing marine hunters were vacant. The ecological space was available for any lineage capable of claiming it. The ancestors of whales were not the only mammals to try. Multiple lineages experimented with aquatic life during the Eocene. Some would become seals and sea lions. Others would become manatees and dugongs. The whales were simply the most successful, the lineage that committed most fully, transformed most completely, eventually dominated most thoroughly. The empty ocean was an invitation. The crowded land was a push. Together, they created the conditions for one of the most dramatic transformations in evolutionary history. The fourth hypothesis is climate. The Eocene was warm, globally warm, tropically warm, warm in ways that modern humans have never experienced. Palm trees grew in Alaska. Crocodiles basked in Greenland. The Tethys Sea was bathwater, a vast expanse of shallow, productive, comfortable water stretching across what would become Europe and Asia. In this warm world, the costs of aquatic life were lower than they would be today. An animal entering the water did not face the thermal shock that would challenge a modern mammal diving into a cold ocean. The temperature gradient between air and water was minimal. The metabolic expense of staying warm in the water was manageable. The warm Tethys may have been a nursery, an environment where the early experiments in aquatic existence could succeed without immediately confronting the thermal challenges of true marine life. The whales could learn to swim in the warm shallows before their descendants faced the cold deeps. The training wheels were built into the environment. As the climate cooled after the Eocene, the whales were already committed. They had developed blubber, increased their metabolic rate, evolved the physiological tools for maintaining body temperature in cold water. The nursery had served its purpose. The graduates could survive in the harsher ocean that replaced it. Climate created the opportunity. The whales seized it. The truth is probably all of these and more. Evolution does not work through single causes. It works through accumulated pressures, overlapping advantages, multiple factors pushing in the same direction. The early whale ancestors entered the water because predators made the land dangerous, and food made the water attractive, and competition made the margins appealing, and climate made the transition feasible. Remove any one factor, and perhaps the transition still happens. Remove several, and perhaps it does not. The contingency is real. There is no guarantee that any given lineage will undergo any given transformation. The whales happened because circumstances aligned. Ecological opportunity, environmental conditions, ancestral traits that happened to be pre-adaptive for aquatic life. A different set of circumstances might have produced a different outcome. The ocean might have been colonized by some other mammalian lineage, or by none at all. We cannot replay the tape of evolution. We cannot rerun the experiment with different starting conditions and see what emerges. We have only the single history that actually occurred, the path that led from Indochus to blue whale, from terrified prey hiding in streams to the largest animals in the history of the planet. The path was not inevitable. It was not predetermined. It was not designed. It was simply what happened when certain animals faced certain pressures in certain environments over certain spans of time. The outcome feels miraculous because we know how it ends. The process was mundane. Survival and reproduction, repeated endlessly, accumulating changes too small to notice until the sum transforms the whole. The whales returned to the sea because return was advantageous. They stayed because staying worked. They transformed because transformation followed from the logic of natural selection operating on variation over time. The why is simple, the how is complex. The result is wonder. The ocean is dark now. You have traveled far, through 50 million years of transformation, through rivers and estuaries and shallow seas, through the warm waters of the Tethys and the cooling currents of the Oligocene, through extinction and radiation and the slow, patient accumulation of change. You have watched legs become flippers and tails become flukes. You have seen teeth give way to baleen, lungs adapt to diving, ears reshape themselves for a world of sound. The journey began with a bone smaller than a walnut. It ends here in the deep water, where the descendants of that bone's owner now swim. Somewhere in the Pacific, a blue whale is resting, not sleeping exactly. Whales cannot sleep the way you sleep, cannot surrender consciousness entirely, must keep some part of the brain awake to remember to breathe. The whale drifts at the surface, one eye closed, half its mind quiet, the other half maintaining the ancient rhythm of air and water that has defined cetacean existence for 40 million years. The whale is female. She is perhaps 80 years old, born in an ocean that still remembered the last echoes of commercial whaling, raised by a mother who taught her the migration routes and feeding grounds that her grandmother had taught her mother. The knowledge passes down through generations, cultural inheritance layered on top of genetic inheritance, memory added to instinct. She weighs 150 tons. Her heart, the size of a small car, beats 4 times per minute at rest. A rhythm so slow it seems geological, tectonic, aligned with processes that measure themselves in eons rather than seconds. Her blood vessels are wide enough for a child to crawl through. Her tongue weighs as much as an elephant. She is the largest animal that has ever lived, larger than any dinosaur, larger than Maiacetus, probably, despite that ancient whale's dense and massive bones, larger than anything the land could support, larger than anything the ocean produced before or since. She is the endpoint of a trajectory that began with Indochus hiding in a stream, terrified of predators, seeking refuge in the one element where the rules were different. 50 million years. 160 million generations, give or take. From a creature the size of a raccoon to a creature the size of a building. The transformation is almost impossible to comprehend, too vast to fit into a human mind shaped by decades rather than eons. Yet here she is, real, breathing, alive in this moment, carrying the entire history of her lineage in every cell of her body. The night is quiet in the deep ocean. No wind reaches here. No waves disturb the water below the first 100 meters. The only sounds are biological. The clicks of distant dolphins hunting in the darkness. The low moans of other whales communicating across hundreds of kilometers. The occasional creak and groan of the whale's own body adjusting to the pressure. The whale does not know she is the culmination of an evolutionary epic. She does not know about Maiacetus or Ambulocetus, about Basilosaurus or Dorodon, about the toothed Mysticetes that tried a different path and failed. She knows only what her senses tell her, the temperature of the water, the direction of the current, the faint taste of krill on the tide, the distant song of a male somewhere to the south. She knows how to dive, how to hold her breath for 20 minutes while descending into the darkness where the krill gather, how to lunge with her mouth agape, engulfing 500,000 calories in a single gulp, how to surface and blow, the spray rising 6 meters into the air, visible for miles on a calm day. She knows the migration route, thousands of kilometers from the polar feeding grounds to the tropical breeding waters and back again, a journey her ancestors have made since long before humans existed, a path written into her neurons by 1,000,000 years of repetition. She knows the songs of her kind, not the complex compositions of humpbacks, but the low resonant pulses that blue whales use to find each other across the vastness of the Pacific. The sounds travel through the deep sound channel, bouncing off the thermocline, reaching receivers hundreds of kilometers away. She has been calling for weeks. Somewhere, perhaps, someone is answering. This is what 50 million years of evolution has produced, an animal so exquisitely adapted to its environment that it seems inevitable, designed, perfect. The flippers that were once legs, the blowhole that was once a nose, the baleen that replaced teeth, the echolocation that some of her cousins developed, though her lineage took a different path. Every feature optimized, every system refined, every aspect of her biology shaped by the relentless pressure of survival and reproduction across deep time. She does not know any of this. She simply lives, breathes, swims, waits for the krill to aggregate, for the season to turn, for the call that will draw her south toward warmer waters and the possibility of another calf. The knowledge she lacks does not diminish her. The history she cannot access still flows through her, encoded in DNA, expressed in every heartbeat and every breath. She is the whale that walked, transformed beyond recognition, carrying the land inside her like a secret she has never been told. The stars are out above the Pacific. The same stars that shone over the Tethys Sea 50 million years ago, more or less. The constellations shifted, the positions changed, but the light ancient even then, traveling across distances that make evolutionary time seem brief. The whale surfaces to breathe, and the starlight touches her back. The same starlight that touched Maiacetus wading in an Eocene river. The same starlight that will touch whatever creatures swim these waters 50 million years from now. The continuity is real. The atoms in the whale's body were forged in stars that died before the Earth existed. The water she swims through has cycled through the ocean system for billions of years, evaporating and condensing and falling and flowing, passing through the gills of Devonian fish and the tissues of Mesozoic reptiles and the cells of every whale that has ever lived. Nothing is new. Everything is connected. The boundaries we draw between species and eras and individuals are conveniences, useful fictions that help us understand a reality too continuous to grasp whole. The whale breathes out. A cloud of vapor rises into the night air, water that was inside her body moments ago, returning to the atmosphere, beginning another journey through the cycle. Some of those molecules will fall as rain over distant continents. Some will be drunk by animals that have never seen the ocean. Some will find their way back to the sea and perhaps, in some future century, pass through the body of another whale. The breath fades. The whale inhales, filling her lungs with air that contains oxygen molecules breathed by every creature that has ever lived on Earth. The atmosphere is a shared resource, circulated endlessly, connecting every air breather across time and space. When you breathe what whales have breathed. When whales breathe, they breathe what you have breathed. The separation is an illusion. She descends again, slipping below the surface, the starlight fading as the water closes over her back. The darkness welcomes her. She has spent most of her 80 years in darkness, in the deep water where her kind feeds and travels and lives. The surface is for breathing. The darkness is for everything else. You have been listening for a long time. Perhaps you are still awake, following the whale into the darkness, wondering where she will go, what she will find, whether the songs she calls will ever be answered. Perhaps you are already drifting, the words washing over you like water, the story dissolving into the rhythm of breath and heartbeat that connects you to every mammal that has ever lived. Either way is fine. Either way, the story continues. The whale swims on. She does not know that someone is thinking about her, imagining her, tracing the long history that produced her. She does not need to know. Her existence does not depend on being witnessed. She was here before humans. She will be here perhaps after humans are gone. Or her descendants will be, changed in ways we cannot predict, shaped by pressures we cannot foresee. The fossils wait in the rocks. Maiacetus in Pakistan, Basilosaurus in the coastal sediments of the Tethys, Basilosaurus and Dorudon in the Valley of the Whales, their bones scattered across the Egyptian desert like messages from another world. Rodhocetus, the tiny pharaoh whale, Maiacetus, the impossible giant, Maiacetus with its tennis ball eyes and nightmare teeth, all of them silent now, their lives reduced to calcium and phosphorus, their stories recoverable only through the patient work of science. The living whales swim above the fossils of the dead. The ocean holds both, the present floating over the past rising occasionally into view when erosion exposes what was buried or when a researcher chisels into the rock. The story is never finished. Each year brings new discoveries, new species, new details that refine and complicate what we thought we knew. Hans Terwissen is still working. Philip Gingerich is still excavating. Hashim Salem is still exploring the Egyptian desert. Eric Fitzgerald is still studying the strange whales of Australia. Ross Dullard is probably walking Jan Juk Beach again, scanning the cliffs for the next surprise. The search continues because the ocean keeps giving up its secrets, one bone at a time, one patient discovery at a time. The whale knows none of this. She swims in the eternal present, the only time that animals inhabit, the only time that matters for survival and reproduction. The past is encoded in her body but invisible to her mind. The future does not exist until it becomes the present. She lives in the now, completely, without the burden of history or the anxiety of anticipation. There is something restful in that, something worth carrying into sleep. The night deepens over the Pacific. The whale has found a patch of krill dense enough to be worth the effort of feeding. She lunges, her mouth expanding to impossible dimensions, the pleated throat ballooning with water and prey. The baleen filters, the tongue pushes, the krill slide down her throat, fuel for another day of existence, another link in the chain that connects her to Indochus through 50 million years of unbroken descent. She will feed until dawn, then she will rest again, drifting at the surface, half asleep, waiting for the next opportunity. The rhythm of her days has not changed in millions of years. Feed when food is available, rest when it is not, migrate when the seasons demand it, reproduce when the conditions are right. The simplicity is deceptive. Behind it lies the most complex biological machinery the ocean has ever produced. But the pattern is ancient, stable, proven by 40 million years of success. The stars wheel overhead. The current carries the whale south toward warmer water, toward the breeding grounds where her kind has gathered since before the ice ages, since before the Mediterranean dried up and refilled, since before the Isthmus of Panama rose and divided the Atlantic from the Pacific. The continuity is almost unimaginable, stretching back through epochs that have no human witness, connecting this moment to moments that no consciousness recorded. You are part of that continuity now. By listening, by imagining, by following the whale into the darkness, you have joined the story. The atoms in your body are the same atoms that built Maiacetus and Basilosaurus and the blue whale feeding in the starlight. The genetic code that organizes your cells is written in the same language that organizes hers. The differences are vast, but the kinship is real. 50 million years ago, there was no distinction between your lineage and hers. You shared ancestors, shared genes, shared the same uncertain future in a world where anything might happen. Then one population went one way, toward the trees and the savanna and eventually the cities. Another went another way, toward the rivers and the estuaries and eventually the open ocean. The separation produced wonders on both sides, consciousness and language and science on one branch, the largest animals in history on another. Both outcomes improbable, both outcomes real, both branches still growing, still changing, still becoming whatever they will become next. The whale does not know you are her cousin. You did not know it either until the fossils and the genes revealed what had been hidden. Now you know. The knowledge changes nothing about her life and everything about how you understand your own. The whale is swimming. The stars are shining. The fossils are waiting in the rock, patient as they have been patient for millions of years. The story will still be here in the morning, still unfolding, still accumulating the small changes that become large transformations over time. You have traveled 50 million years tonight. You have watched the impossible happen. Legs becoming flippers, nostrils becoming blowholes, a terrified deer-like creature becoming the largest animal the planet has ever seen. You have learned that evolution does not plan, does not design, does not see the future. It only solves the problems in front of it, one generation at a time, and sometimes the solutions accumulate into miracles. The whale is a miracle, so are you. So is every living thing, the product of 4 billion years of unbroken descent, 4 billion years of survival against odds that would seem impossible if we did not have the proof swimming in front of us. Let the ocean hold you now. Let the darkness be soft. Let the rhythm of the whale's breathing become your own rhythm, slow and deep, in and out. The ancient pattern that connects all air breathers across all of time. The whale swims on. The stars shine down. The story continues, whether anyone is awake to hear it. The whales are dreaming of an ocean you will never see, and somewhere in their dreams, they remember walking. Good night.